Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully, we are live. Hopefully, for once, I have not made a mistake of this and everything went according to plan. And this is where Rob and Tom, who are with me, are going to tell me that everything's working and everybody's happy. So far, fingers crossed, 100%. I'm going to take that as a yes.
Like it's working.
I've done it. See,
we have audio on the stream.
Don't assume you've done it yet. Don't assume you've done it yet. That's how it's going to break.
There's no faith. There's no faith anymore. No, I have learned from my mistakes. People, I have learned how to stream. You can always make new mistakes. I can make new mistakes. Well, you know, I'm sure. I can't see that. This is the downside. So I got a request to turn the chat off, so I can't actually see the chat. So you guys are going to have to fill me in on the chat as we go tonight to see if there's any interesting questions. Because I don't think...
If it was turn off the chat, I think it was to try and change the colour of the background so it didn't contrast with the stream so much. I don't know if you can do that on YouTube though.
No, well, you can do dark mode. I think you can do dark mode if you're watching, but I don't think I can change the way it appears in OBS. Maybe I can, but to be fair, if you watch a stream back now, you can kind of... You can see the chat anyway in the chat replay, but neither here or there. We're not here to talk about YouTube, are we? We're here to talk about the Union, the Cardassian Union, led by
basically the greatest race besides the Dominion. Really, let's be honest.
Well, it's probably the greatest race if you just ask the Cardassians. I think they would say that. You know,
yeah, they did kill the Bajorans, so I'll give them. I'll give it to them.
Killed the Bajorans, enslaved the Bajorans, generally ruined the Bajorans' day. You know,
that's enough. That's enough good deeds for me.
You know, they're very oppressive. So, Tom, do you want to tell us a little bit about the background of the Union from a lore perspective? Who are the Union and what are they about?
Oh, just dump that on me.
Just have it.
Fair enough. Testing my Star Trek knowledge here, right? Well, as we all know, the Cardassians were a peace-loving, spiritual people, birthed on the homeworld of Cardassia Prime, where they peacefully and culturally and spiritually, yeah, absolutely right, interacted with their neighbours and provided support to the neighbours and friends close to Cardassia Prime, and formed a nice circle of friends, really, with all of those around them.
The Bajorans back to the wormhole aliens.
No, of course that was all before the military takeover, where all of a sudden the entire Cardassian Union did a 180 and became a militaristic dictatorship, where they exploited their neighbours for all of their resources to build a great empire, as the illustrious Goldar Heel, or the imposter of Goldar Heel, might say. Fundamentally, I mean, if you're looking at it from a gameplay perspective, we've done the Union in such a way that we highlight the resilience of their vessels. When you think to the DS9 episode where Goldacart is attempting to evacuate the Detapa Council, for example, a Galore being attacked by, I think, like 2 or 3 birds of prey, and then also birds of prey, and then a Vulture. Yeah. Managed to hold on for a long-ass time, even without shields, weapons, engines, basically nothing. They had the hull, and that was about it. So, you know, when it comes to the Cardassians in the way we've done in Armada 3, as everyone I'm sure here has played and is aware, they are a very resilient faction, and that's not really something we've looked to try and change fundamentally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they've been made famous. A lot of people come to Star Trek through Deep Space Nine, and then kind of, rather than necessarily started at the beginning even, there was a lot of new fans that Deep Space Nine brought in, and of course the Cardassians were kind of appealed to that, and the one character in particular, Goldie Katz, who became, I think, kind of a fan favourite, because
definitely,
you know, there were times where you wanted to, like, you were rooting for Goldie Katz. And then there were times where they done the plot so well for him as a character that you just, you hated him. But you couldn't really hate him.
That's just it. When you look at DS9 interviews of with the actor whose name currently escapes me, they initially did him as more like cameos rather than a full-on, fleshed-out, long-term plot for him. Yeah. But people liked his story, his background, his acting. and they kept on writing him back in and back in, and certainly, absolutely a fan favorite. Really complex character.
Brilliant. I love his sort of his cocky and his arrogance. I can't remember the name of the episode. This is the problem. There's so many episodes of Star Trek, but the episode where he's implemented the security program on Deep Space Nine, and he's so cocky. He beams on, the phasers flying past him. They won't target me, I'm a Cardassian. And then when he tries to beam off, of course, it backfires on him because his commander has basically overridden his program and basically accused him of being a mutinous traitor to the Cardassian Union. And then says, "You will die with your post," you know. And his face at that point,
He's just like, oh no.
Well, damn.
Shit.
Yes, Mark Alamo.
Mark Alamo.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Union is the Cardassians are a fascinating group of people that you see in the series, and they each, even, you know, when I think to Damar and what a fan favorite he was as well. You know, there's a lot of good Cardassian characters, and I think they did a really good job of it. Rob, do you want to tell us a little bit before we go into like versus other factions, but do you want to tell us a bit about the general play style of the Union in Armada 3, the final edition?
Yeah, I think that's actually really fitting how they play, because in the beginning, in these sort of early stages of the game, they're very expansionist, because they have kind of an option that most other factions don't have to industry spec their capital and throw down a couple extra yards to get out ships quicker. So it's interesting how they play similar to Dominion in that way, but then they play defensively once they interact with other players. So they're very expansionist, and that kind of feels fitting.
Yeah, absolutely. Interestingly, Armada 3, for those that don't know, is such an old mod that it was one of the first mods to really, really dive into the whole cross-factional split, which was built into Sin's Rebellion. And this allowed, this basically, I think, came in with it was an expansion, I think, for the Titans, wasn't it, if I remember right, Tom, where you could choose to go Rebels, or you could choose to go the core Loyalists, sorry. And so they kind of put this code in, and then what it allowed was you to work the manifest, the gameplay entity files, so that you could assign ships to that faction. And of course, that led us, when we were making a mod 3, because we didn't at the time have the skills when we were building mods, and obviously we've come a long way since that time, but we didn't have the skills at the time to build as many ships as we would have liked for the Dominion, and there wasn't that much reference around. So when we thought we want to do a Call to Arms, which was the expansion, we want to add the Cardassians in, and we want to add the Dominion in. So we came across the idea of using that gameplay design to build what we call a split faction. And you will now see split factions in a few mods, and in our other mod, AOTF, as well. And this allows you to basically, as a player, or even as the AI has the same choice to choose a factional split. And the way we went with it was quite simple. We wanted to say, well, okay, we know what actually happened in Deep Space Nine. They joined the Dominion, and that led to their ultimate downfall. But what if they never joined the Dominion and they had sided with the rest of the Alpha and Beta Quadrant factions against the Dominion? What if they decided to stay as one Union? And so we wanted to explore that side, because we felt that the Cardassian people, the Cardassian Union, was such a strong faction in the series and had some fascinating characters that we really wanted to bring those characters to life in Armada 3. So while Armada 3 is often very true to the lore, we do take a little bit of liberty in certain areas to bring in certain characters from other games, and also from the TV series into the game. So for those that don't know or are new to Armada 3, if you're watching for the first time and never played the Union, the faction split is actually under Union protection, so it's our second tab of research. And here, right at the start, after you've got your first couple of stations up on your homeworld, you have the choice, the divided loyalties. So where there's tensions between the traditionalists and the Dominion sympathisers, and you can either choose to go with the Union, or you can choose to go with the Dominion. And that will give you access to different ships and different technologies based on what you pick. And the nice thing is you can see that you don't get access to everything if you choose one of those factions. So you can have essentially some of the ships being the same as we saw in the series, with the Galore being quite heavily featured in the Dominion fleet. in Deep Space Nine, or if you go to the pure Union side, you see ships that perhaps you didn't see in the series that come from other games as well. So there's a real interesting character just in this one choice. So if you're choosing it as a faction, you then have to make the decision whether you're going to play Dominion, which we're going to show in another stream, because they're quite a big faction, to be fair, themselves, and they play very differently to the Union, just to reassure you. Or you can choose to go to the Union side. And if you look at their main page, this is where you would not get access to some of the Cardassian ships if you decided to go Dominion. So certain ships are sort of frozen out from your choices if you choose to go down the Dominion route. I think that's enough about the research tree. Let's talk a little bit about the actual ships themselves. As we do in every factional review, we want to give you a bit of our thoughts on the ships, their abilities and what they do, because often the info cards can be confusing. And we want to tell you at the end of all of that about how to fight other factions, what their strengths and weaknesses are. So if you're playing against them, you've got a chance against the Union. And of course, as we go along, guys, as always, if you have any particular questions about the ships, both Tom and Rob, I believe, are watching the chat, so they can pick up on those questions and answer them either in chat
indeed.
or on the stream. So, and do forgive me if I make any mistakes. I try not to, but I'm only human at the end of the day. Sadly, I'm not a Cardassian. So we'll start off with the boring one, which I always like to start off with because it's the easy one and I don't have to remember anything. It's the Scout. This is the Terran class Scout. If you're wondering why does it look like a Hideki, because pretty much it is nearly an identical model to the Hideki. One of the jokes in the Armada 3 team is, Max, why did you make 3 Hidekis? So because we didn't have enough Cardassian ships at the time. And if you know about our other mods, again, just a shout out to them. We are building a full Cardassian faction with very different ships, so we've come a long way with our Cardassian designs. But yeah, the Terran class Scout, not much to say. It's just Scout. It has the normal automatic scouting. It's quite zippy. It has a micro anti-cloak scan, the same as the other scouts. It can detect mines, etc., etc. So there's nothing really special about the Terran. It's got a slightly different paint scheme, so you don't confuse it with the Hideki class. That's the Terran. Very nice and straightforward. Which brings us nicely onto our first ship, our starter frigate, in fact. I'm going to hand over to you, Rob, for this one. This is the Razalak class, one of my favourite starter ships, actually.
Yep, it's easily one of the. I think it's probably tied, in my opinion, for the best, because I also think the Romulan's plasma burn on theirs is great. But this ship has an ability that strips armor, so anything that strips armor from a target is really powerful. So this, by proxy, is really powerful.
Yeah.
Aside from that, it has very light armor, anti-medium weapons. It's is kind of along the same design as everybody else's sort of starter frigates, and it's really solid.
Yeah, it's a fantastic starting ability because obviously you have some multiple Razalaks, and the fact that it can also affect structures, star bases, capital ships. -2 armor debuff on a capital ship from a starter frigate. It's pretty strong. So,
-2 armor on anything is really strong.
Yeah, it's such a good little ship. So it's only a small duration, bear in mind, so it's not overwhelmingly, but just having it there and letting it auto-fire off is great. I wouldn't try to micro any of the frigate abilities, just let them fire off, unless you have some really weird wish to micromanage all your ships one by one. And then that brings us on, and I will say, actually...
someone's asking how many times that can stack, and I think it doesn't stack, does it?
It doesn't stack. So there's no stacking on this. Generally, if something stacks, there's not much in A3 that does stack, and generally it's only things that have overlapping effects that stack. So things like chance to hit, debuffs and stuff like that can stack with other abilities, not themselves. So you can have 2 of the same capital ship, for example, with the same ability with chance to hit, but they won't stack on top of each other. However, you can have a different ability that has chance to hit that will stack with that one. So generally we don't tend to stack the abilities or allow them to repeat. There are a few exceptions which we'll come on to when we come to our next ship, which I'm going to ask Tom to talk about, which is the actual... no, that's not it. It's because they look the same. The Hideki class, or Conservator, as some people like to call it.
Yeah, the actual Hideki. So the actual Hideki is the corvette for the Cardassian Union. So it is the Miranda of the Union fleet. And as you see in Deep Space Nine, it often blows up in sort of a similar way that a Miranda would.
Rams Deep Space Nine.
Crash into the shields.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, the Hideki actually shares quite a lot in common with the Klingon Raptor as a corvette. It is a fast, very light patrol ship. So the Hideki in sort of lore was always a patrol ship anyway. The Cardassians have a likeness to calling everything a warship if they can get away with it. But the Hideki was very much a patrol ship. Its size reflected it. Its armament reflected it. That said, insufficient numbers. It is quick.
Yeah.
And whilst its armament isn't too sizable, it's of a sufficient class that once you begin to stack them, as it has a buff to assist with, you end up with a ship that is very good at an very light task. So generally speaking, what you use the Hideki for, similar to the Klingon Raptor, is you'll want to use it to harass and destroy enemy frigates and corvettes. So if your opponent is harassing you with a Wing of Defiance or Harpies, the Hidekis will upscale very well against those ships, very cost efficiently as well. And I believe will have the speed to keep pace with a Defiant. So from a sort of counter perspective, the Hideki is a very good, cost-effective, quick-to-build reaction ship for the sort of rapid pace raiding that we like to try and encourage when people play Sins. Of course, in a PvE environment, you might find the Hideki to be a little bit niche, but in PvP, certainly a wing of Hidekis shouldn't be ignored as a threat against certain classes of ships.
Absolutely. And I suppose this is probably the best example of a stacking buff that I can give you in Corvette. So as we said in all the other factional videos, this one does have a stacking buff. So up to 20 times you can stack the traditional formations buff. And the really exciting thing about the Cardassian ones in comparison to the other, as we just mentioned, there was the damage reduction and the chance to hit. And there's a lot of chance to hit debuffs in Armada 3 that are effect based. So actually, as you build more Hidekis, the better your chance to hit percentage goes. So you counteract those debuffs. So actually, it's a very, very powerful stack, because obviously if it stacks up to 20 times. So you can effectively get 20% damage reduction across all of your Hidekis. And that isn't anything to be sniffed at, especially unlike other Corvettes where they tend to just hunt down. If you've got them in your main fleet, where they're getting stacks from the other damage reduction buffs as well, they actually become very, very tanky and are quite nice in the core fleet. So in kind of an opposite function to other Corvettes, they kind of run really well with the main fleet as well as doing that Corvette role. That's not to say you can't do one or the other, but they become really good, solid support ships. So definitely one of my sort of more favourite Corvettes, and has an interesting sort of play style. They are pretty fast for the if you fly them. I tend to advise players to remember that in Sins, if you have a fleet and you're playing, and we're trying to encourage you more to kind of play effectively, especially in PvP if you're playing each other, to kind of spread your fleets out, because actually that's a benefit. And Rob's played many games where he's demonstrated to the PvP community that actually having a death pool doesn't really work too well, especially in this version. Actually spreading out is quite good. So that's where we encourage the use of Corvettes. But I think, as I said, overall, what you'll notice with the Union is that if you're trying to combine all the fleet together and move all the ships, including the Hidekis together, obviously the fleet will travel at the speed of the slowest ship. So just be aware of that when you're playing any faction, that if you're grouping your ships together and you're then asking them all to move together, they will go at the speed of the slowest vessel. So that can really slow down your ship. So it's just worth bearing in mind.
Yeah, that will destroy you as the Union, because you'll never be able to react to other factions, especially like Dominion, where their ships are built for speed. If you're trying to move your whole death ball over to deal with harassment in multiple areas, you're just going to fall apart.
Yeah. Union are probably, obviously we ignored the Borg for a second, but Union are probably the slowest faction out of all the factions in terms of speed. So it's just, well, not probably, they are. and just something to bear in mind. So that kind of brings us nicely, Rob, onto the Osset class, which is our kind of piddly little anti-fighter ship.
Yep. So this ship, I guess, not too much to say. It does have the micro torpedoes that can go out and kill strike craft. It obviously very light to deal with strike craft, and I think it has does it have a tachyon pulse as well?
It does. It has an anti-cloak scan. So this is one of your sort of like the scout. It's quite a good one actually. So like the other sort of ships, it's where if you've got a few of these, it's quite a good way to decloak ships, is to have that light anti-cloak scan. So yeah, it's just another good little ship.
And it's important to think that this is also medium armor. So in some cases, it's going to be, especially against strike craft, very good. So
yeah. And I think, guys, you're already probably noticing, if you've been looking at the info cards where we're going here, that actually the Cardassian ships tend to have less shields but more hull, and they tend to have more armour. So they're very good at sort of tanking up, as Tom alluded to in the episode with Ducat. So just something to bear in mind is that they really, really benefit from their armour research as well. So when you're going through your tech tree, just consider how you want to tech up. And again, Rob will give you some strategies for teching up as we go towards the end of the video. So moving on, Tom, what brings us to the Moset class. It's very just the names are all kind of very Osset, Moset, whatever way you want to say it.
Well, Cardassians have fairly similar names often as well. It is your planetary siege ship. Nothing too special. It is pretty slow. So if you are fielding these in your fleet, keep in mind that this will be one of the ships that does slow your fleet down. Broadly, in terms of combat stats, it's not going to win any awards. It's a medium armor vessel with an anti-light weapon type. So realistically, if you are trying to deal with a Moset that's attacking, you want to be attacking it with, for example, starting frigates. They're a very good counter to siege ships in general, or some of the more early stage cruisers like the Intrepid or the
you wouldn't want to use the Intrepid. You'd want to use the Excelsior. You mean the Intrepid is anti-light, right?
Anti-light. You're right. Sorry. Yes, Excelsior, Katinga, that sort of class of ship.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I believe its ability is increase armor.
Yeah,
armor and hull restore rate. Yeah. So once it's in position and is sieging and is fulfilling its duties for the glory of the Cardassian Union, you can give it some additional armor so it can survive a little bit longer to get off those siege bombardment shots.
It's good for killing Bajorans.
Yeah, very, very good. Very, very tanky little ship, actually. And I just want to kind of mention a little bit here about the design elements, because I think it's fair to say the Cardassian, when we did the Cool Times expansion again, this is where Max, who couldn't be here with us tonight, really did start to I say hone his skills, because Max is a brilliant modeler anyway, but as you know, in some of the earlier factions we had a lot of legacy models, but this is where Max started to do a lot more touching up of the ships at this point in the mod's life, because we were kind of 3.5 years in, I think, when Cool to Arms came about, and you can see that just even the detail on the ships. The sort of the bump maps, the light maps are a lot better, and so all credit to it. I mean, Max is far away above better than this now, but even for the time, this was amazing. You can even see, I don't know if you can see it too well on my screen here, but even on the kind of ship vents, you can kind of see the grilled effect starting to come in, and to the point that while he's just got blue windows here on the kind of the more modern mods that we're doing now, he's actually taking photos from the series and actually put those in the windows. So if you zoom in some of the windows, you can see some of the famous scenes throughout Star Trek history. And it's a little known fact that you guys might not know. So Max really does go to a lot of effort on the detail of these ships in particular. And I get a lot of feedback about the Union ships being some of the most beautiful in the game. And just so you know why that is, because obviously Max's skills just got better and better as he continued to make the mod. And today they're just, I think, unparalleled. So yeah, brilliant. So that brings us on to the last of the frigates, Rob, which is the Facade class.
Yep, torpedo frigate. Light armor, anti very heavy.
Mm-hmm.
going to be, good at punching up to capital ships or destroying structures. This impulse overload ability that Keith is highlighting here is actually probably one of the best things about it. This can target any ship, and it essentially just stops them from moving. So this is one thing you might actually consider microing on a frigate, even though he said don't micro frigates. Abilities that can just stop things from moving. If your enemy's running away with a capital ship and you use this and just stop it from moving and kill it, that feels really good. Its other ability, I believe, is a torpedo... proximity torpedoes, and it gives a little bit of a debuff as well, and it has some extra range. So
if that one sets off, it only lasts a little, but it effectively stops its own engines and then gives it the duration is longer than 2. This is the weird info card thing, but effectively increases the weapon range. So it's good. It's a good little ship.
I believe it's a toggleable ability.
Yeah, I think it is actually. Let me unpause. There we go.
Switch between the two. It's an AOE torpedo.
Yeah. Don't leave. So it is a toggleable ability, so you can be in either mode if you like. Cool. Right. Let's pause that again. Otherwise, we'll get loads of sound effects. So that makes up for the frigates. Sometimes people used to refer to this as a spork Cardassian ship. So there we go. So let's go on to our cruisers, and we'll start, I think, Tom, with the kind of very, very well-known ship in the Galore class.
Yeah, so the Galore is now fulfilling the role of, sort of the equivalent role of the Excelsior. At one stage in the sort of meta development of Armada 3, the Galore really was a very powerful ship. It has 2 abilities which these days are been brought down in power scale quite significantly to retaliate damage that's taken and to resist damage that's received as well. So they sort of work in parallel with each other.
Yeah.
But as a core line combatant, I believe the current damage stat loadout for the Galore is heavy armor and heavy weapon type. So it's very much a peer-to-peer class vessel. It will receive quite a lot of damage from capital ships or larger scale cruisers like Akiras or Corvettes and Falcons. But similarly, it will do quite well itself against those. Where it will suffer is against smaller classes of ships that have punch-up weapon types. So things like torpedo frigates, late-game corvettes, so Defiance, Harpies, Cavorts. But all in all, a solid mainline cruiser that certainly shouldn't be undervalued.
Yes, absolutely. And it's worth mentioning that in the tree, the Galore comes under 2 variants as well. So there is, if I can find it, where is it? Here we go. There is a refit for it, and the refit does give it some extra goodies. The refit's actually different depending on whether you play Dominion or Union, because the Galore features in both fleets. So you can take a note of the Type 4A or Viscount. So you get some extra hull, some shields, some extra weapon range, some extra speed and acceleration, etc. Depending on the research that you do. So and what faction you are. So it's quite a good little ship, and again it's a beautiful model, which is really great. We will now go to the Norrin class, Rob.
Yep, Norrin's great. Can decloak things. Has a direct damage ability. It's let's see, medium armor, anti-light weapons, so it's good against corvettes, and it performs that role very, very well.
Yeah, it also has a target sublight engines buff. So this is one of those weapon chance buffs where it has chance to target on its weapon hits. It has chance to do a max speed, acceleration, and turn rate debuff. And you'll see a lot of these in the Union where they're trying to slow things down because they are themselves quite slow. So it's just something to to know. But it's a good little ship. It's quite cheap. Probably, would you say you would build these guys sort of in comparison to the Intrepids? Yeah.
The direct damage ability really helps it be quite powerful.
Yeah. So it's kind of like an Intrepid for the Cardassians. The Cardassians and the Federation had very, very similar kind of fleets and technology at one point. So that's just something to bear in mind. Yeah.
I was going to say, kind of in the mod, it diverges sort of at the Galore, where the Excelsior, like Tom was saying, punches down, and the Norrin punches up.
Yeah.
I think the Norrin's direct damage buff actually can stack a couple of times. Somebody's asking. I'm pretty sure it can stack.
Potentially, I think it can stack up to maybe two
Three?
or three times, something like that. The interest of it is, like the Intrepids one, it can actually target capital ships and dreadnoughts, so it's quite a good direct damage ability.
Yeah.
So
it actually helps the ship be more well-rounded than an Intrepid in a way.
Yeah, so I like the Norrin. I've always liked the Norrin, though. It's kind of an interesting ship, and it's an interesting design. And we'll come on to where you'll see Norrins more later. And that kind of brings us to Tom, the Tonga, or what some people call the chubby cruiser.
It's the utilities cruiser, essentially. It will have a repair ability. It is your boarding craft. So the Cardassian Union and Dominion don't have carrier cruisers. And as such, an alternative had to be found for what ship is your sort of support boarding vessel. The Tonga for the Union fulfills this role as a support cruiser. It'll have a larger crew complement than normal to act for repair engineering teams, so it makes sense in a way that they might also be used to fulfill Cardassian soldiers around the Empire.
Yeah.
So it comes with a capture neutrals ability, and I believe it also is in possession of a boarding ability. So although the Tonga itself has some not awful but fairly mediocre combat stats, the boarding ability presents opportunities for you to capture enemy vessels for yourself, which can give the Tonga a little bit of additional viability than might otherwise be expected. It does, of course, come with the repairs as well. I believe it's the highest rate of hull repair of any of the repair ships, because at the end of the day, Cardassians have more hull. And then it also has a decloak ability, again, sort of highlighting that support role.
So much anti-cloak on the Cardassian Union. Like every ship has an anti-cloak.
There is a lot of anti-cloak. I mean, they're used to fighting Klingons now, so they've had to learn a hard lesson.
Yeah, absolutely. They weren't faring too well just on their own against the Klingons. So in this kind of alternate take, they were still invaded by the Klingons, which led to that's our kind of plot line to the Union's formation in this sense. So yeah, so that's the Tonga. Rob, the Corridas, which is the special ship for the Cardassians, because no one has anything like it.
Nuts. No one has anything like this ship. This ship's nuts. This ship is super powerful. In fact, the biggest proponent of this ship, one of the guys in the multiplayer community, told me not to tell you guys how strong this ship is because he doesn't want it to be nerfed. But this ship is amazingly powerful. So it has a powerful frontal damage reduction ability, but it's really in its armor and its weapon types that it's so powerful. So it's light armor like a Corvette, but this thing has anti-very heavy weapons. So this thing is one of the only ships that's available this early in the game that can punch up that hard. This thing smokes capital ships. It smokes heavy cruisers. This thing is awesome.
Yeah, it's a great special cruiser. It's what we call as kind of like a beam sniper, and I was just trying to show that is its weapon range. Now, just to put that in perspective, that doesn't seem like a lot, but believe me, when you're looking at other ships, that is a big, and you can see other stuff here, you can capital ships. That's a long range. So because it's got that frontal damage reduction, a few of these in your fleet are going to go a long way to really helping you punch heavy. And the Cardassians are kind of specialists at punching armor and that. They don't make big use out of torpedoes, and you'll see that in the series. They're very much, we don't know why. There's a lot of fan theories around them having to conserve their torpedo stocks and favouring beams and beam technology in comparison to other factions. So this is your beam sniper. It's a it's a great ship. Doesn't mean it doesn't have photon torpedoes, because you can see it does. But this is your really nice phase. I don't think it's that bad, Rob, where you can build it and you can win the game automatically. I think if you just built Coronasses, you
against Borg you could just build Coronasses.
Maybe against Borg, but I would say that each of the factions are pretty balanced out. But so what I would say is, remember that if you're playing against the AI and they see you building lots of Types 1 ships, the AI are actually quite clever in things which people don't realise, but the AI can adapt to what a player is doing depending on what difficulty you set them to as well, but they do adapt to what ships you're building, and the AI is very good at understanding weapon types and armor types and how to counteract your fleet. So just bear that in mind.
I actually think this is a great example of why you shouldn't just spam one type of ship in this game now.
Yeah,
you get up to the Akira and you build only Akiras, and the Cardassian player builds only these. Man, you're gonna be really sad.
Absolutely. So so if you're thinking, I can still spam a certain ship, no, you can't. You do need a mixed fleet. I keep saying it in every stream, and I'm sure some of you will try it, but don't come crying to us if you play a Union player and he's built loads of Coronasses and outnumbers you and then wipes all your Akiras out, because we can say we told you so. But yeah, I love the Coronass. Really, really unique. That's your special ship for the Cardassian fleet. I think
it should
it's great.
Definitely be noted. It's only forward-facing damage. It doesn't have any side or rear-facing damage.
Absolutely.
So if you are attempting to kite an opponent away with the Coronass's improved range, you won't be doing any fire backwards. It is very much a aggressive hit-and-run type of vessel.
Yes, and it's obviously named after a character from the series as well. So great little ship. So I'm just going to talk about this one because it's the most boring of all the classes, but they have to be in there because you need to deal with star bases because they're problems. This is the anti-starbase vessel, or heavy artillery vessel, if you like. It has the usual. It has the siege mode for itself. It has the group siege mode if you want to do multiple of these. There's nothing much to say about it other than, as with all artillery ships, it's quite fragile. Very long range, can outrange star bases, and shoots giant pew-pew lasers at them and hopefully kills them. You do need these, right, and I keep saying this, players, you still need artillery ships, unless you're using the Romulan buzzard, of course, and playing Romulans. But you do need artillery ships to deal with star bases. I think, well, Tom, you've done a lot of work on star bases and outposts, but I think normal outposts are kind of dealable with by a fleet.
Yes.
But then when you get to the large star bases, which are obviously quite expensive, your fleet's going to take some significant losses to those if you don't have artillery. So if you're going up against the large starbase, you probably should try and siege it a bit first, would be the general advice I think we'd give still, right?
Yeah, definitely. You can do quite a lot of damage to certainly non-fully upgraded starbases with conventional armaments. So your heavy cruisers, capital ships, but certainly supporting those with Darheels, and broadly speaking that's across factions with their siege ships as well, is definitely something you want to make sure you do. And if you are going up against fully upgraded star bases, you definitely want to be softening them up and sieging them out safely using the long range siege ships that you have at your disposal.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, while sticking with you, we're going to come on to our first sort of weird ship, if you like, for the Union, which was not seen in the series, but actually comes from another Star Trek game. Bonus points in the chat if you know which Star Trek game this featured in. This is the Kessock Hybrid, which is a hybridized galore.
Yeah, so essentially one of the things to come out of the last release of Armada 3 was a little bit more ship diversity between the Union and Dominion factions, especially when it came to their late game fleets. This was partly pioneered by the fact the Galore essentially fulfilled the midship cruiser and late game cruiser at the same time, which is part of the reason why it was so powerful. So what the Kessock ships that have now been introduced and designed to fill is to fulfill that late game cruiser role. So in this instance, for the Cardassian Union, we have the Kessock Hybrid Galore class, which features not only enhanced damage over the regular Galore, it does have some additional weapon types.
Yep.
For a little bit of extra damage. It has enhanced versions of the Galore's abilities, so the damage reduction and damage retaliation abilities. But of course, the downside with attempting to go too heavily into these is they do cost quite a bit more in terms of their fleet supply. That said, with how the damage types are currently, the Kessock hybrid does, according to the spreadsheet I'm looking at here, have anti-medium weaponry with heavy armor. So it's one of those ships that you want to be using in the midfield if your opponent starts attempting to deal with your fleet composition with earlier game fleet builds of things like torpedo frigates, early game frigates to then counter what you're attempting to counter the torpedo boats with.
These are great against carriers as well.
Planet bombers and carriers, they will do very well against those as well, definitely. So it's just something to keep in mind, really, when it comes to how you opt to use it in practice.
It's actually a lot more fragile than the standard Galore as well. So you can see the Galore has got 4,050 hull points, whereas the hybrid only has 2,850. So it's a lot more fragile in general. So that's just something to bear in mind in the difference between the normal Galore and the standard hybrid. But if you look at, I'm just going to hover over the Galore here for a second. You can see the Galore has 105 phaser damage at this point, and 46 photon torpedo damage. So not great in terms of output. As soon as you go to the hybrid, as Tom mentioned there, you got 176 phaser damage. Then you got 54 photon torpedo damage. Then you've got an extra 68 phaser damage and a 14 pulse disruptor damage. So there's actually a really good reason to build hybrids, is that they are really nice. I wouldn't say they're glass cannons because they can still tank, especially with the increased energy dissipation build with the 3% damage reduction. But
these are actually pretty unique too. There's not really another ship that kind of dominates the medium field the way that this does.
So this is an interesting ship. So now, to get these ships, I just want to remind people, because I often get asked the two questions. One, how do I capture neutrals? Well, we've covered that. That's the Tonga with the Cardassians. The second one is, how do I get the Kessock ships? You need the fabled AR-52 comm array. So there are two communication stations for the Dominion and the Cardassian Union. One is the AR-52 comm array and one is the standard comm array. That doesn't mean you should never build the standard comm array, because it actually has an ability as well, which we'll come on to. I don't think I built one in here, actually. I must do that in a second. But the AR-52 is a special comm array designed to call in your support ships. One of them being the hybrid, one of them being the heavy battleship, which we'll come on to. And the heavy battleship itself used to be a cruiser. You may have noticed that we're not actually got it here as a cruiser, and that's because it's changed, and we'll come on to that in a little while. But that's how you get the Kessock ships. You call them in, and what they'll do is, like every call-in, they'll fly into the edge of your gravity well, where you've built that station. They are on a cooldown. The cooldown is pretty much similar to what a build time would be in a traditional building sense. The nice thing about them is, obviously, if you have multiple stations, you can call in multiples at once. So it's a very different way of reinforcing your fleet. And if you have those spare logistics slots, then you could effectively call in 4 at once, pretty much. So it's a different way of building ships. It's a lot faster in some respects if you're doing multiple call-ins, but then you've got to wait for that cooldown, which then evens it out with the normal way of building ships. So just something to point out, really. That's how you get them. And last but not least, Rob, we come on to the new edition, which people don't have, and they're going to go wild for, which is the Keldon class heavy cruiser.
Yeah, it's like the Galore's big brother. It's tanky. It has some damage reduction ability. And it has a smaller version of the Spiral Lance Wave that, if you've played, on the current version, that is on the Starbase. And basically, what this does is anything it travels through, it will deal that direct damage of 1,500 to, and the target that it hits, it will deal it as well. And this is a really powerful direct damage. So you have 5 or 6 of these guys, and you want to kill like a capital ship, and you micro them to all fire at that ship. maybe you used a facade to slow the ship down so that it couldn't get away from these guys since they're a bit slow.
Yeah.
And you fire all these spiral lance waves at it, you're gonna decimate it.
Yeah.
They're tanky. They have a good damage output ability. They're gonna stay in the fight, and they're a little bit slow. So yeah. As far as their actual weapon and armor types, if you'll give me just a moment, since my brain's not working, they're very heavy armor and they're anti-heavy weapons. So they're going to be basically your standard heavy battle cruiser.
Yeah. I think the nice thing about the spiral wave launch as well is for a short duration, it's only 2 seconds, but they will actually disable weapons on dreadnoughts and capital ships for 2 seconds. Now 2 seconds doesn't sound like a long time, but you got to remember you can build multiples of these. But that's actually quite a powerful thing that's procking off in your fleet. So even if you're just leaving them to fire it off, it's quite a cool ability. And the point defense system is good. And your guys are probably going to me, well, hang on a second. I swear we already had the Keldon. You do, but we'll explain why there's a change in a little bit. I felt when I was balancing the Union faction, I was missing something vital to really combat the Akira. The hybrid, I really wanted a different role for, and the Kessock heavy, I wanted to use differently. So the thing you're getting with the final edition of Armada 3 is the addition of the Keldon as a buildable ship, because one of the other reasons is you can only have limited amounts of Keldon capitals. And I really love the Keldon class, and I felt this was the natural evolution to the Galore, or some people were about to refer to it, the Humpback version, and I felt it just added something extra to the fleet. So now you can have a lot of Keldons, a lot of Galores together, and I think that adds something quite special for those that are the Union fans, and that kind of closes us nicely away from the frigates and cruisers and moves us on to sort of the battleships. I need to fight. In fact, where is it? I have misplaced a ship, or I didn't build it. Hang on, wait a second. 1, 2, no. Oh, this is terrible. I'm embarrassed to say it. I didn't actually build. Do you know what I didn't build? Didn't you guys? I didn't
Janissary?
build the Janissary of all the ships not to build.
The most important
ship. Most important
At least
ship.
the stream worked this time.
That's true. The stream did work. There we go. The Janissary class. There we go. The stream worked, but I forgot a ship. So we'll bring this over. So the Janissary class is an interesting one. It's your starter capital. Tom, do you want to tell us, while I move it into position and get some levels on it, do you want to tell us a little bit about the Janissary?
So the Janissary is your starting colony capital ship. So as with all colony capital, it comes with a colonizability. It has some fairly sometimes they're perceived as being not too great. Other times they're actually surprisingly valuable. You have an boarding party ability. So much like the Tonga, you can use this capital ship to sort of upscale and sort of nick an enemy's vessel that's more valuable than potentially what you have. So if you fancied stealing an Akira, for example, for its quantum, I say quantum, I can't remember what it's, chain reaction pulsar ability, for example, you can do that. Or if there's another frigate that has a certain debuff ability on the Romulans or Klingons that you wanted for your own to try and stack it with other things, that's where you can then use boarding abilities to help diversify fleets even more and make use of the different abilities that are available cross-faction. You then have a area of effect debuff ability, which I believe affects chance to hit and energy weapon cooldown. So enemy vessels fighting within that range will receive more damage themselves, because your weapons are more likely to hit. No, I'm getting that the wrong way around.
Yeah, they're less likely to do damage to your ship.
They're less likely to hit you because they have it more difficult to aim, and they will do a slightly slower rate of fire, so they won't shoot quite so often.
Yeah.
And then the last ability is it's the one that's the more niche of them all, but that said can still have its own value. Ultimately, it's a tractor beam. It has a fairly short duration, but it does have a reasonably decent cooldown time. So you can use that, especially in the early game with the boarding parties, to sort of lock down enemy ships, prevent them from escaping, allowing you to deal the damage and either kill them, or if you wanted to capture them as well. We've just today gone over a pass of capital ship antimatter. So whilst there is a little bit of nuance to how the abilities can be used, hopefully we've found a nice balanced cross-faction whereby there are no longer some crazy discrepancies in terms of total antimatter usage and how many abilities a ship can use at once and continuously throughout a battle or engagement.
I can see there's conversations raging over the new Keldon and how powerful it is. That's always good. We do test these things, guys. Honestly, we do. So tractor beam is good. I think just to mention the colonize ability as well, because we did this with the other factions. If you use the colony capital to colonize, you will get a 43% extraction rate increase for I think it's five or so minutes there. So there's always a debate on whether to speed through the normal colony ships or to wait for your capital ship to get there. I think you should do both, but actually having an extraction rate boost on a planet for a few minutes at the start, if you can get your mines up pretty quickly, is actually quite nice in the gravity world. But it is, I grant you, this one's not as strong because you need to actually get those mines established. But it's there nonetheless. And overall, again, this is often considered quite a fat ship because it's quite broad, but it's your kind of standard typical Cardassian shape, a lovely design, and hasn't changed, so it's good. Shall we move on, Rob, to let me explain first of all. So we had a Keldon class which we mentioned in the cruisers, and then people are going to say, well, did we get rid of the other Keldons? And the answer is no. There is still a Keldon for capital ships. But you'll notice there are some subtle differences. This is the only one to feature in the General Union fleet. And that is, and you will see it in the Dominion fleet, although they were predominantly wiped out. But you will see Tal Shiar versions of the Keldon class. And if you remember the episode where I call him Fake Riker, the clone of Riker, stole the Defiant, he actually tried to sneak in and find the secret sort of production facility of the Tal Shiar, not Tal Shiar, Obsidian Order. I keep saying Tal Shiar. I'm obsessed with Romulans. Obsidian Order, sorry.
They did work together.
Yeah, they did work together. That was the fear. They were working together all of that. So this is the Obsidian Order Keldon, and yeah, it's if you notice the difference, it's actually different colours. So the skin is very different. It has a blue deflector. It has orange tongues in its impulse and running lights. It's very, very, very different texture-wise. So you will be able to tell them apart. But this is the only Obsidian Order one that you'll see. So yeah, great. I see Triptych's like eager to test the other Keldon and see how many things he can one shot. I said, well, you can try that with the Akira as well, Triptych. And you can tell us how many Akiras it will take to one shot something. I think it's going to be a lot. So the Akira does a little bit more damage actually than the Keldon.
Depends on what you're trying to one shot, but yeah, even just knocking something down quite far and then finishing it off.
There's a lot of similar abilities to that Keldon beam on the other ships as well, like tachyon beams, various things like that. I think the Manticore has something when we come to the Dominion in the next stream. So yeah, that's the Keldon class capital ship. In terms of abilities, well, it has engineering drones, so it's actually got a pretty decent repair. It can repair capital ships, frigate structures, starbases, and dreadnoughts. And corvettes, obviously. So pretty decent. It targets up to 4 things in its vicinity. Obviously, it increases by level as well. It then comes with armoured warfare. Now, this is the one that's kind of like the...
Were you going to change that one? Did you commit to that?
It's changed already, as you can see.
Did you change it already?
Yeah, it used to give more armour. It used to give much more armour and damage reduction. But it now only gives armour. It gives 1 armour. I can't remember what the increase now is. I think 2, 3. Yeah, it does. It gives you
0.51.
Did you change it?
Yeah.
Isn't it 0.5 every level? It
It's
starts at
0.51, 1.52.
so it's not changed.
It's not changed. I did change it originally from the original thing that it did, because it changed a couple of times.
Oh, right.
It used to give more armor, but it only at max level it gives 2 extra armor. But to bear in mind that this will target everything in that giant circle there, so it's a great buffing ship.
Up to 2 of these.
It was still
stackable.
It is stackable up to 2 Keldons, so you can have 2
Oh,
Keldons.
you want 2 of these in your fleet.
Yeah, so which will give you 4 armor total. Which it sounds like a lot, but armor isn't as good as shield mitigation in Sins, but still worthwhile. Armor, as me and Tom were discussing earlier, each armor point gives you a certain amount of hull, or equates to a certain amount of hull, if you like, by means of having armor. So it's quite good. It's
an EHP sink. I mean, you got 25 ships getting 4 extra armor. That's
pretty good.
Nice.
It's pretty nice. So that's pretty worth taking. And then point defense system, which is for itself, which basically gives it damage reduction, so they stay around longer to keep those buffs alive. And then the one that you kind of want to get, which is a sensor scrambler, which again is a big circle, and that basically reduces the enemy's weapon range, which is quite handy, because you got to remember the Cardassians want to be on top of the enemy fleet. They really don't want to be getting shot at from far away, or having the Dominion fly all over them, or the Klingons fly all over them. They've had to learn that lesson, that they can't really deal with hit and run tactics. So forcing the enemy ships to have less range in Sins basically means the ships have to move in closer to actually attack their targets. So it's quite a good ability, and obviously another chance to hit debuff. So there's a lot of chances to hit here that really do affect their. Some people are going to probably question like whether chance to hit, if it hits 100%, does that mean that everything misses? No, that doesn't actually work that way in Sins. So there's diminishing returns on chance to hit. And even if you did reach 100%, you can still hit. It just makes the percentile chance. It just means that I had to explain it, that you'll still hit, but for every 2 times you fire your weapon in a tick, for example, one of those wouldn't hit if you reach 100%. So that kind of is how it works, to explain it. I'm not very good at explaining this, Tom, am I? This is why you never get a modder to explain things. So that's chance to hit. Shall we go on to the Legate, Tom?
The Legate.
Or Legate, whatever you want to say.
Legate Damar, so I think we'll go with the Legate class. It's one of those ships that has received some additional sort of changes over time. It's a little bit of a niche ship, and it's certainly one of those capital ships that you don't take it on its own. You definitely use this as part of a fleet composition. It comes with 2 actual toggleable abilities you use yourself that are not passive. The first of which is the Stellar Shockwave. That provides a effective movement disable for a brief period of time, as well as dealing direct damage to those in the area of effect and reducing their chance to hit for the duration, I believe, of 11 seconds. There might be some hidden values in there that cause the effects last a little bit longer. I'm not 100% sure. Depends on the ability chain. The second ability is an antimatter siphon, so you will be able to drain an opponent's antimatter and replenish your own with that ability. In addition to that, I believe it also disables the ability of the vessel that you're draining antimatter from. So this is one of those abilities that you can sort of stack with the Rassilak, for example. If there is a ship that you want to have their abilities disabled, the Rassilak, along with Antimatter Siphon, can be used to keep abilities disabled on a particular target for as long as you want, potentially. And the capacity to disable abilities is certainly one that shouldn't be underestimated. The second ability has had a slight rework now, because it is a change to ability cooldown rates, antimatter costs, and antimatter restore rate. It now only has 2 levels. It's one of those abilities that people very plainly didn't really need to put many points into. And as such, we sort of changed that to reflect the need not to put as many points into it. The final ability is, unlike the Keldon's point defense, it is an AoE damage reduction, which, as Banana has been chatting about in the chat, is one of the abilities that you use to really suit up, as it were. When the Cardassian Death Ball is getting on its Kevlar armor, strapping on the armor plates to its shoulders, turning into a space marine, this is the one of the first ports of call you take for that fleet armor and damage reduction. Definitely, if you're going for a tank fleet build, you definitely want a Legate.
Yeah.
You should be going for a tank fleet build.
You should, but I think if you're running a Death Ball, this is where, because people would ask about
Death Ball, but your main fleet should be a tank fleet.
Yeah, your main fleet should be quite tanky. We'll come on to the downside of running Death Balls in particular at the end. But yeah, it's a good sheet. Glorious Command. I mean, to be fair, it's got nothing on the Hootet, but we'll come on to the Hootet in a bit. But it's a good little damage reduction.
That adds up. It's great. Crank it up to max. I think it's 12.
It's 20.
20%
damage.
God,
reduction.
It's way good.
You don't know your own abilities.
Oh my gosh! I thought it was 12 at one point.
No, it's 20%. It's good. It's good. But again,
that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
So, Rob, as you're so excited, you can talk to us about the again another chubby boy.
I'm more excited about the damage reduction. I'll talk to you about the Kulinor though.
Come talk to me about Kulinor. Come on, the giant
this
cannon.
Is a disabled ship that can summon species 8472.
It is.
So, for the people who want that is the first thing I will mention. And then the species 8472s, those bioships have been buffed, so this is a much more impactful thing now. As you notice, there's not a credit cost, there's not a direct supply cost, so that's just free reinforcements, and that's really powerful anyways.
Yeah, the really nice thing about it is myself and Tom were speaking about this, and I think we decided with Tom that actually the duration that the bioships were alive for was kind of not great.
Essentially, yeah. The issue was the bioships have a couple of different damage classes on the ships, and the big damage type had a very sizable. I think it's a cooldown like 20 seconds.
Yeah.
And the duration of the summon species 8472 was, I believe, effectively 20 seconds. So all you actually got off was one shot of this actually big damage weapon, and a couple of shots of this much smaller, weaker damage type.
Yeah.
So the way we've changed the ability is to increase the duration to sort of coincide with the number of shots that the main big gun of the species 8472 ship does can actually fire before the ships expire. Interesting question, Triptych. I don't believe they have a force attack.
They don't have a force attack.
They're not a decoy ship like, for example, the Romulan Shadow or Janeway has. But they will, if something shoots at them, obviously that's damage taken away from dealing damage to the actual ships occupying fleet supply, in contrast to the summoned ships. But certainly now the way we've changed the duration, not only do you spawn additional bioships per level, you will also get more shots of this main cannon, which does an awful lot of damage. It's a very beefy amount of damage. You will actually get more shots of this out. All I will really say is just beware when they spawn. Make sure you utilize them to get them firing at what you want them firing at. Yeah. Otherwise, they might distribute that damage against something you don't necessarily want it firing at.
Yeah, I think people didn't used to take species 8472 as an ability of the Kulinor because it wasn't very great. Whereas now, I think we've given you a real choice. And if you want to use them,
take the Kulinor.
Well, it is a very big damage multiplier. Sincerely, it is a very big damage multiplier now. If you opt to level up the ability,
yeah, and I would say that If you're worried about the Keldon Heavy Cruiser's damage from its one spiral launch shot that it can do, you haven't seen nothing until you summon a bioship in. So they're pretty tasty for the Cardassians if you summon them to help your fleet. And I will add that the bioships, obviously they're in at max level, they're in for 130 seconds. They're actually quite fast as well. So if you need to chase something down because you target an enemy ship when you spawn it. Actually, it's quite a handy ability, and it's got a very long range, 10,500. So very, very, very good. There is a difference between this bioship and the militia one, in that the militia bioship can actually call in the other bioships, the smaller variant. I'll say this is right. It calls in other bioships plus the central bioship, I forget the name of it, that allows you to then basically attack planets. So they can actually decimate planets and things like that, the militia ones. What we can say, because I haven't really talked about that in Armada 3 yet, but is actually we've changed all the militia that are assigned to planets now. So for you lovely people, when you get your hands on this version, hopefully not too far away from now, you should see more Species 8472 on the very tough worlds, as well as the Husnock as well. And so be prepared to fight for your lives if you try to take that planet. So just be aware of that if you do run into the militia bioships. They've been buffed. And they should. They're still damaged bioship, so they're not full bioships, because to be honest with you, if we put a full bioship in the game, your fleet would be getting one shot. So there we are. Should we talk about the rest of them, Rob? Rob?
Oh, I'm sitting here talking muted. You're like, where is he? I'm like, I'm here. I'm talking. Why are you guys ignoring me?
No. You mute yourself. Go on.
Oh, I was just saying a nice chance to hit debuff, some negative to whole restore rate. So it's okay. That ability's okay. Next ability over, Protomatter Cannon. That just big bombing damage. Nuke planets fast. Gotta go fast.
Yeah, it's been buffed as well, so now it really does chunk planets quite well with its giant cannon underneath. And Fav's done a little bit of particle work on the cannon shot, so it should be much more interesting now to actually take it. So if you want to decimate planets quickly, because the Cardassians are quite slow, so if you need to bear that in mind. That the quicker you can speed up the destruction of enemy planets, the better it is for you. So, just you want to get in, blow up planet, get back out again to the next planet, then you need to take abilities like this. And then the
Radionic Storm, which is just a big debuff to chance to hit, acceleration, turn rate, all those good things.
Yeah,
well, not to hit.
And Tom mentioned that we obviously looked at antimatter cost of abilities. I want to just mention that Radionic Storm, Ion Storm for the Klingons, and any other type of big giant storm cloud or effect that basically is sustainable and requires antimatter to supply it, you will actually have seen a 4 times increase now. So before it was like 1 antimatter drained a second, now it's 4 antimatter drained a second. It doesn't sound like, but it starts to add up when you're using other abilities, because there is a cost to activate it as well, 75, and you can see that across most of the factions now. So actually, before you'd be like, yeah, auto include Radionic Storm, auto include Iron Storm, they're so powerful, that's fine, but bear in mind that actually you could severely starve your ship of antimatter by continually just letting them pulse off. So what we're trying to do is, we're not saying that you're going to definitely run out of antimatter, but I think, as Tom alluded to earlier, we are saying to you need to be a little bit more careful about just firing off all your capital abilities as before, because if you let them all fire off on smaller targets, because they do have they do have, for the AI, if you let the AI run your abilities for you, most of the min requirements are only 4 ships. So if they fire off a Radionic Storm or an Iron Storm when there's only 4 ships there, it's a small fleet, especially against if you're playing PvE, you may find when you really need the ability later on, you're in trouble because you've actually wasted all your antimatter. So that's something to bear in mind. And again, I will point out that in all of the trees where you have this antimatter research, I've actually cut the levels of the research you can do. So you're actually going to find that your antimatter supply has dipped drastically in this version of the mod to before. Before, I don't think you even looked at antimatter or even cared about antimatter, were really bothered by it. I think it's fair to say now, if you agree, Tom, as well, I think it's fair to say that you will care a little bit more about antimatter, not to the point that it's going to ruin the game.
Certainly in the early and mid stages of the game where you don't have all of your capital ships levels, you don't have all of your research, it is a resource that you are going to want to pay a bit of attention to when it actually comes to how you're using your abilities.
Yeah.
Well, and for the people who didn't get the antimatter researches anyways, you guys are crazy. Get your antimatter research, because I know a lot of people just don't bother.
Yeah, and we want to make that a little bit more realistic to how not only how other mods do it, but also how the stock game deals with antimatter. So I think antimatter is more important now. And as I said, those levels have been pretty much sliced directly in half. So you have half the even in the tech tree, you have half of the chance to increase that antimatter and that antimatter regen. And all the capital ships have had their antimatter levels readjusted. So it can be incredibly punishing, and a big one that because I know I'll get accused of bias, but one culprit of this was the Shadow class of the Romulans, which had 4 very heavy antimatter abilities that would just fire off forever because it had such large antimatter pool and regen. No longer can that Shadow do that. So again, you need to think about how you're using those abilities. So, but the Kulinor, fantastic ship. I think you do want it in your fleet. That's my opinion. I think
you do now for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
It seemed like a big boost to it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can never go wrong with debuffs, and blowing planets up faster is also, you can never go wrong with that.
And I think where the game's changed in this new edition, where you're going to be, if you're playing the AI or playing player versus player, depending on who you're playing, if you're playing a friend and you're both used to playing death balls, then fine, you can still have at it in a death ball. But I know again from the multiplayer community that's been testing, they tend to favour. They still have their core fleets, but they tend to favour spreading out and attacking multiple fronts. And the Cardassians find that quite hard to deal with. So again, as we said, anything that speeds up the game in terms of getting past certain planets and onto the next one is really beneficial. So
yeah, I'll talk about some tactics to kind of help mitigate that harassment later too.
Yeah. So we're on to the Archon, Tom. Can you tell us a little bit about what is the Cardassian carrier? The unique design.
It's yeah, the galore with some pods strapped to it.
Yes. Upsize galore.
The Archon is, as already alluded to, it is the carrier for the Cardassian Union. Very tanky vessel. But broadly speaking, not the worst ship in the world. The Union and Dominion are not really strikecraft based factions, as evidenced by the fact they don't have a cruiser type carrier. So any strikecraft you do take is, in all honesty, it is a niche build option. Yeah. That's not to say it can't be useful and it can't contribute, but it is pretty niche. That said, the Archon does come with some very useful abilities. It has an elite saboteur ability, which I believe the info card is a bit deceptive, because although it does damage, I'm not sure if it does additional ship disables, as the string might suggest.
It does. I've checked it, so it will actually target ships near the target ship in a kind of chaining effect. So it's quite cool. Interestingly, that bit where it says assimilated by Borg is actually true as well. So if it's a Borg ship, or it's been assimilated by Borg, it'll actually do more damage to anybody that is assimilated by Borg.
So yeah, assimilated Excelsiors, assimilated Akiras, assimilated Katingas,
assimilated Galores.
Assimilated Galores. Yeah, these elite saboteurs will do more damage to those classes of vessels. Maybe they've got a special anti-Borg charge of some description.
They don't like Borg. Who likes Borg? Terrible faction.
The Cardassian Union certainly doesn't.
Yeah.
You then have magnetic subversion, which is a variant of, it has to be said, the stock ability on the Dunov, which is another ability disable, but also causes strike craft in the vicinity to crash into the target of this particular ability, which I believe does damage.
does. It's not a lot of damage, but it does.
I'm not sure how much damage, but I believe it does. And if your opponent's using a lot of Strikecraft, it can stack up.
Really good against Federation.
Yeah, so although it itself might not be a heavy Strikecraft faction, that ability can certainly make your opponent's Strikecraft regret taking off. The third ability is a variant of the Fortress mode that you see on the Typhon for the Federation. It's very much a slow down. I'm going to put a tortoise shell over my head and weather all of the fire that comes at me. And it does it very well. Very big boost to armor. Some modest increases to its damage and weapon range. All in all, if you're slogging it out with your opponent, that's when this ability will come into its own and keep the Archon alive.
I will say, if you think the Typhon is slow in Fortress mode, you put an Archon in Fortress mode and try and move it. It's painful.
We have no engines. We took the engine block and put it into additional armor on the exterior of the hull. Yeah. Sorry. And then the final ability is a hangar expansion, which has had a rework now. So rather than providing for additional squadrons and additional Strikecraft per squadron, it is now just an additional squadron ability. So yes, you do get the elite squadrons, of course, though, in the Archon, so the Iron Order, as it were.
And interesting with the Cardassians is they have a third type of Strikecraft which you don't see in the other factions, and they have this kind of Bentar, which looks like another Hideki, funnily enough. Sorry,
the third Hideki.
There it is there. Which are kind of like mini Corvette Strikecraft, if that makes sense. So that's interesting. Pause it. So you can build that, and that is hidden inside the ship. I love this game sometimes. There we go. There they are. There you go. So you can have if you want a gunship. There you go. The Nadar gunship, which looks, funnily enough, like a Hideki. You can build them, but they're actually quite good, and they've got quite good phaser damage output, and they're pretty good at killing other Strikecraft and bombers. So that's something that may be worth investing in as well if you want to choose them over your normal other Strikecraft bombers.
They are a beefy gunboat for sure.
Yeah, there we go. But that's the Archon. I would say I think the Archon is still usable in the similar role that we talked about the other carriers. I'm a big fan of it. I used it. I played a PvE game recently where I kind of went off to another AI world and just dropped 2 Archons in their world and just let them blow up all the stations over time. And that worked. And the AI was trying to blow them up, but wasn't really succeeding very well because it was distracted with my other fleet. So the carriers are really good distraction. As I said, you can use them as Tom pointed out to deal with other carriers, and they're deceptively good against the Federation actually, because the Federation has a lot of Strikecraft. Especially if their fleet is defended.
Potential for sure.
Yeah, if they've got lots of Hanna stations and and Typhons and Curries, then actually it can be quite good with the magnetic crystals. So I think they're pretty good. They are, as far from memory check. I have to check the files. I think they are both very light in terms of the Nadar gunship. Now. Yeah, I think they're both very light.
Very light and composite.
So that was it. They are good against everything. That was it. So composite damage is our special damage type, which basically means they punch basically at 50% damage.
And very interestingly, the anti-very light beams can fire in every direction. Apparently,
there you go. This is the Trelkor. I've never actually looked at. Do you know what? I don't think I've ever zoomed in on the Trelkor fighter, but there you go. That's what a Cardassian fighter looks like. And if you want to see the bomber, I can do that as well.
It was. I think it might have been Max's inspiration for a new ship that will be revealed in the future.
Yeah, this is really Max just wants this. It's his own private shuttlecraft. So that's the carrier. And last but not least, shall we go on to Rob the lovely new, because this used to be, if you remember, this used to be a cooling cruiser. What we've done with the Kessock Heavy is we've changed it. It's now a cooling capital ship. So this is now joined your... I wanted to kind of branch out the capital roster from 5 to 6 ships to kind of make it feel a little bit nicer with the other factions, which have a lot more capital variety. So the Cardassians have now gained the Kessock Heavy Cruiser. And it's not a heavy cruiser. It's actually a capital ship. But there you go. The Kessock Heavy Cruiser has now become a capital ship. Rob, do you want to tell us a little bit about this beast of a ship? It's big.
Yeah, you know what? I think the primary interaction on this ship you want to watch out for is it's got an ability that's kind of similar to the Borg's tactical cube, where the more things shooting it, the more tanky it becomes. It gets a bunch of damage reduction and shield mitigation, and the shield mitigation is really the important thing there. Between the two, when that gets stacked up, if like 10, 15 things are shooting it, that makes it an insanely tanky ship, and then it has an ability that can taunt things to shoot it. So it's basically there to absorb damage in mass. And then let's see, its other two abilities are
repair binding,
which
the
is
best
good.
Repair in the game. I will add, this is probably the best targetable repair from memory in the game, in the sense that that whole repair the second. And the whole points repaired is a lot. It's
pretty good. Yeah, it's actually, I think, a good reason to build two of these, and you have them kind of use that ability on each other while they're soaking up a huge amount of fire. And then it has this target weapons ability, which is another ability where when it hits enemies, I do believe that it has a chance to apply this chance to hit debuff to them. So when it's shooting enemies, it will be constantly kind of taking away some of their damage.
Yeah, I think it's from memory, it's something like, with all the chance to hit weaponries, I think it's something like 15, 20, 25, 30%, something like that chance to apply on weapon proc. So that basically means when a weapon hits the target. So every time a weapon fires, and that's all the weapons, it has a chance to apply that. Now, you're seeing a theme gathering here that basically what the Cardassians do is they basically prevent the enemy, although there are diminished returns, it prevents the enemy from actually hitting their ships. So if you like, it's a way of, you've got damage reduction combined with chance to hit debuffs, which basically means the Cardassian fleet overall is a very, very tanky fleet. But what you will notice again is the damage output on the Kessock Heavy Cruiser. And if you think back to some of the Romulan ships we saw in earlier streams, and I invite you to go back and watch the videos, is really kind of lackluster. It doesn't really, none of the Cardassian ships really punch like heavy with their weapons.
They're more, the way of thinking about it is they're kind of in the middle on damage, because they do have the 360-degree arcs, so they're really good to put in the middle of an enemy fleet and just outlast them. And I think this ship is a great example of that. If you have two of these in your fleet, but you also have a Legate giving the 20%, you have two Keldons giving the 4 armor, you have the legendary Gol Madred, giving some damage reduction. But by the time you add up all the damage reduction of all that on these things, and they're sitting there, absorbing damage by taunting the enemy fleet, and you have all this other damage reduction, your fleet becomes... I would argue, if you get to the absolute maxed out endgame Cardassian fleet, it's almost unkillable, because it's just so tanky.
Yeah, you need to. I think we'll talk about it at the end, because we're getting ahead of something. But I'll talk a little bit about some of the factual weaknesses I see, and Rob can talk about it from a PvP perspective, and I'll invite Tom obviously to add input as well from a PvE perspective on the faction. But generally, I think this is a good ship now as a capital ship. The armor is 26. It's a really tanky. I can't, again, 9,000 hull, 26 armor. It's a really, really tanky ship. So it doesn't do a lot of damage, but what it does for your fleet is so much more beneficial. They are incredibly expensive in terms of both supply cost and credit cost. So when you're buying these, you're not going to want to have too many of these. You're probably, as we said, there probably 2 in your fleet. Otherwise, you're just going to lose out on so much more. And their abilities, they're not going to necessarily directly, buff the damage that you do out to others. So that is our capital ships. Again, with this, you call this in from the AR-52 Comare we mentioned earlier. This brings us on nicely to the hero ships. And I'm going to allow Tom to introduce us to the one, the only. There he is. Mr. Goldacut.
Goldacut, commander of the Second Order. Yes. Ignoring the elephant in the room, or planet there, of course. Let's talk about the heroes first. Goldacut is the hero you get first for either Union or Dominion.
Mm-hmm.
So going over him here, we might skip over him in the Dominion stream. Who knows yet? He is very much the initial tank of your fleet build. So once you have Dukat on the field, what he actually provides for you is not too insane. As with all hero ships, they only have actually 3 abilities in practice, because unfortunately the other ability slots are used as prerequisites for other things. Behind the scenes mod shenanigans. So the first ability is the only actual triggerable ability in moral reinforcement, and we were discussing this recently in regards to sort of how we want it to work in practice as the only triggerable ability for him. So what he does in an area of effect is provide ability cooldown rate to friendly vessels, allow them to use their abilities quicker, bombardment cooldown to all ships, so you can use him as a siege support ship for a flotilla of mozettes or other capital ships. Some initial chance to hit increase to ships nearby, so if some pesky Romulans are trying to pull off some chance to hit debuff shenanigans, this can help to counteract that in a modest way. And then lastly, some damage reduction, because of course, if anyone is going to survive, it is Goldacut. And this then also ties on to his 2 other passive abilities, the first of which provides a cannot be disabled buff to 10 ships within range at first level. I believe that does increase modestly with levels. Oh no, it stays at 10 the whole way through. I'm not quite sure what the duration is there for. I have to have a look through the...
I think if they go out of the effect, it does...
It lasts for 30 seconds, maybe. Have to have a look at the way the ability chain works. And that provides a modest chance to evade, acceleration, and turn rate buff to ships within the radius of 10,000. So just to give you a little bit more mobility, because after all, you are a very slow Cardassian Union fleet. And then lastly, his unrivaled cunning.
Which is for him only.
Direct buff to self for damage reduction and chance to evade, because of course Goldacut has a knack for getting out of the most tricky situations. He was quite weak before, and now he's a lot stronger. He used to get taken out quite easily, believe it or not, and so we've kind of buffed these up, so he's a bit more survivable now. His armor's gone up as well. Obviously, this is end game, so he's got all the armor and all the buffs at the moment. But he's quite chunky now, so he'll stick around. Janeway will no longer be the most invincible hero, as we've already said. So,
she's
but
still pretty invincible.
She's all right. So yeah, he's pretty. I think he's a pretty good starter hero. I'm not sure really. Would you say that he's better than Janeway? On par with Janeway?
I
still say Janeway's better.
Not quite as good as Janeway.
Yeah, I think Janeway's better. That's
Janeway's pretty ridiculous. He's good.
Is he better than Kern?
Yeah. I would rank him as better than Kern.
Okay. We should do that. We should do like our favourite hero rankings. We should do that sometime. That'll be a video for the stream. So that's Dukat. Brings us nicely on to Madrid, Rob. Now, before I start this, do you actually know where Madrid is from, Rob? This is your test now.
Oh, you know what? I don't.
Tom, do you want to fill him in where the famous gold Madrid comes from?
I'm not 100% certain myself. I want to say STO, but I'm not convinced that's correct.
Right, in the chat,
it might even be a novel.
if you know where Goal Madrid comes from, you need to put it in the chat, and we'll come back to it. I'm a bit disappointed actually.
I apologise immensely for the disappointment.
If I said to you, if I just said to you Picard.
Oh,
I think it's triggering now. It's triggering now. So I say Picard. What would you go with? What would you go with? How many?
It's TNG.
TNG.
There are 4 lights.
There are 4 lights. There are 4 lights.
Oh
There
my
we go.
god! Wow.
Oh my word! Do you know what? You two both disappointed me horribly.
I myself.
Oh dear! Oh dear! So guys, yeah. So this is the infamous Golma Dread who interrogated Jean-Luc Picard, and that was just a wonderful episode, and I think it's been memed to death across time, but really powerful episode, and was really, really interesting. So I see Frums is just saying there, I've got the chat on my phone here, and it's just saying, Frums said, it's been like 10 years since I watched it. I think if you've not watched that episode recently, it's actually worth going back just to establish how sinister Golma Madrid is. He is sadistic in the way he treats Jean-Luc Picard. And he all the time, I can't remember the actor now, but he's a really good actor as well. But yeah, it was a fantastic episode. Anywho,
very much so, yes.
My
embarrassment.
Sadism. I gotta go over to sadistic tendencies first, because that's the ability that this guy is just notorious for. Now, it's been changed. It's not as powerful as it used to be. So it gives some damage reduction and it gives some armor to the fleet. But we've kind of tried to move this ability's kind of tankiness giving powers around the fleet more, so that the first thing that happens when you fly into a gravity well with a Cardassian fleet isn't that the entire enemy fleet shoots Madred and kills him immediately, nerfing a huge amount of the tankiness. So it's still really good, but it's not the only thing that's providing tankiness to your fleet, so he shouldn't get targeted as immediately as before.
Yeah.
You know, and then outside of that, actually, the first ability on him. Crank that all the way up. So that's quite a, that's a fair amount of damage reduction. That's a fair amount of armor.
What I did was I kind of split the previous damage. So I tested the fleets against each other, and I know Rob's tested them many times, and Tom's tested them many times, and overall the damage reduction. So a lot of people will see all this damage reduction and go, well, that's a massive problem. How do you kill the Cardassians? It's true if you get them to end game, all that damage reduction stack is going to be very, very strong. But the fact is, like all STA free fleets, you'll notice, if you've watched every video that we've done in the series so far, we've probably gone and said, oh, if you get this faction to end game, oh, they're unbeatable. We said that about the Romulans. We said that about the Borg with the Progenitor.
It's getting there.
Yeah, it's not a question of is a faction strong when you've got it all to level 10 with all your capital ships and your Titan and everything else, and you have all your ships procking off every buff possible. The question is, can you actually get your fleet to that level without losing the capital ships on the way? And in this edition of Armada 3, we've made it that much harder to actually buy levels, for one. So you can't just buy levels willy-nilly anymore. The experience you get is a little less. It's a little less it's lackluster. You gotta have creep. Yeah, it's such a it's so yes. A lot of people will be thinking, well, this is really strong, Bane. Yes, they can be strong, but you really have to invest to get them up. To get to a level 10 capital ship is hard work. It's hard work. Easier against the AI, against a player. As we said before, the average 1v1. If you were to play a 1v1 against a competent player, you're both probably going to finish the game on a small map in around about
half an hour.
Yeah, half an hour, and you're not going to get to these levels. So that's the thing to think about. If you're playing in a 4-player game,
depends on the scale of aggression.
Yeah,
of course,
absolutely. If you're playing in a 4-player game, an 8-player game, then things are a little bit different. You have a chance to build up these stacks, but they're all all quite powerful. A max level of sadistic tendencies, you're getting a 15% damage reduction. And an 80% hull restore rate. Now, hull restore rate, while that seems like a big number, believe me, it's not that exciting. So it's good, but it's not going to break the game. And again, 4 armor, yeah, it's good. It matters. It's helpful, but it's
the equivalent of two Keldons.
When you add everything up, that becomes so powerful. Like you've got the 4 armor from this, you got the 4 armor from the Keldons, you have some buffs from Ducat, you have all these different things coming together is what makes the Union so strong.
Good. Exactly. So let's go on to we'll go on to this first one, psychological warfare. Do you want to tell us a bit about this one, Rob?
It's a passive, basically buff to you, debuff to certain things around you. I mean, there's not too much to say there. Weapon cooldown's really powerful. You want it as high level as you can get. I usually focus on maxing this in sadistic tendencies just for the ability cooldown rate's powerful too. So the ability cooldown rate and weapon cooldown are the things to look at here, and it's why this ability and sadistic tendencies being maxed out is the most important.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the chance to hit there. But I'm going to make a note to go look at this because I don't think that's set right. So that's a negative stack.
Yeah, I think it's something's wrong with it as well.
Yeah, so I will go fix that, I think. Note to self. Psychological warfare.
I think the chance to hit is meant to apply to enemies, possibly. I'm not sure.
That's what I always thought.
I don't think it is, though. I think it's applying to your own.
Is it applying to friendlies at the moment?
Yeah.
I'll just hover over a friendly ship and see.
And it's not that big of a deal. Chance to hit at 2%.
No, maybe it's not. Maybe it is applying to enemies. Because they're not getting it. I don't know. Because there's already so much. It would register on the info cards. I will check that out, guys. That's something I need to do, just to check out if that is actually applying. So, anywho,
and then the other one's it's a big debuff and some damage. And there's lots of things to look at here. The weapon cooldown debuff is the biggest one. You always want to have this ability. I don't rank it as high as the other abilities, but it is a powerful ability. It slows enemy ships down. It gives them less, weapon cooldown. It is the shield restore and hull restore rate don't really feel that impactful. The direct damage not that impactful, but slowing things down and cutting down their weapon cooldown is big. So
it's the damage output that's the big thing.
Yeah, damage output.
Yeah, so
75%. How many targets can that affect?
It's everything in its area, which is a lot.
Oh wow, that's actually more powerful than I ever gave it credit for.
Yeah, it's only 15-second duration though, so it's powerful.
It's still good.
That again might get nerfed yet because I think it's probably I don't know, Tom. What do you think? Do you think it's a bit over the top? Maybe it's a bit over the top.
With 15 seconds,
the cooldown time.
No, the damage output 75%.
I think the cooldown time being 180 seconds, I don't think it's too powerful. It's strong, but it's not.
Yeah. Anyway, that's where it is, guys. Maybe, as I always say in this, seems a subject to change at all times.
I'm not sure if the damage output applies to himself when it's used, though.
I can't remember. I think it applies to it. I don't know. I need to check it.
Hard to tell.
It's hard to tell.
I always thought it applied to him. That's why I didn't mention it.
I'm so used to people killing him. I need to test him a little bit more.
Trashtasticus did also highlight something.
Yes, what's that?
That he is correct. Gol Madred is in a different ship. He is actually in the correct ship now.
Yes.
Because when we get onto Gol Kentar, who is, and I believe Gol Kentar is from the novels or Star Trek Armada 2.
Yeah.
I can't quite remember which. His ship was actually a Kulinor Gol Kentar. And there's been a long-standing mix-up that was only fixed for this upcoming release, that they were in the wrong ships.
This is not my fault. I'm going to plead. I'm going to plead the fifth here. I'm going to plead innocence. Right? I did not have any involvement with this. It
was a max up.
Which we corrected.
So it has now been corrected so that Gol Madred is in the Legate, as he should be, and Gol Kentar, who we'll be going on to in a moment, is in the Kulinor, as he should be.
Yeah, he's in the right one. Yeah, Frums, we will test it. Honestly, we're just failing to remember what metagenic weapon does because we haven't tested it recently. So we probably did test it and then forgot. So we will test it. But yeah, he's now in the right ship, and so is Kentar, which brings us nicely, Tom, to Kentar.
To Gol Kentar, yes. So the reason the Species 8472 bioship summon is on the Kulinor is because Gol Kentar was meant to have it on the Kulinor, and now he has it correctly on the Kulinor.
He does. His one's actually better as well.
his variant of the Summon Species 8472, I believe, is slightly stronger than the. I can't quite remember if it's they summoned a different type of bioship or something, but his Summon Species 8472 bioship is moderately better than the regular Kulanors. In addition, he does have another. Is it an AoE? No, it's an apply to self for armor and antimatter from damage to allow him to keep pumping out these Species 8472 bioships. And then his final ability is a siege support platform. So essentially, this was a little bit. This has had a modest rework recently. The problem with the siege support platforms is the idea behind them is that you use them to support in a siege, of course. The problem with them has been that when you opt to use them, chances are you're already using them in a capital fleet death ball. And if you're bombarding a planet, the damage output of your capital ships is very high. So what does the siege support actually do? All it's doing is contributing to helping you kill the planet a little bit quicker. So it was a very mediocre ability. So what we have done instead now is change the range of the siege support platforms.
Yeah.
And the range is reflected in the ability upgrade. So as you level the ability up, you increase the range at which you can deploy these platforms. So what you can actually do is use Kentar on his own or with a small flotilla to start harassing enemy planets. You can, if you get 2 or 3 levels into this siege support platform, you don't have to hug the planet to start sieging it like you do with most capital ship type fleet forces or with Mosettes. You can deploy these turrets at range and they will start doing quite a bit of damage to an enemy's planet. And used in sufficient numbers, they've only got a 50-second cooldown, so you can deploy them pretty quickly. You can quite quickly start racking up a lot of planet health loss on an opposing planet. And because of the distance you can place them, your opponent will have to come to you to deal with the siege support. So that's another way you can sort of counteract the Cardassian slow speed by encouraging an opponent to have to come to you if they don't want to lose this planet, assuming they haven't got a starbase in system with planet lost bombardment protection.
It's kind of nice too if you're like targeting a specific planet that's like 2 or 3 jumps back in somebody else's territory to just drop these next to the planet and then just fly by and hope they don't realize because they're too busy looking at your fleet to look at the turrets.
Yeah. It's very much it scales upwards quite nicely. And its effect is certainly multiplied. And
it's a more interesting way of playing the mod, I think, having these abilities. You can find it with the normal Kulanor, you can actually do a lot of planet damage very quickly. I'd go to say, well, you don't need dedicated planet bombers necessarily. But yeah, it's a really good ability. I have confirmed what Massive Banana has actually said in chat while you were talking there. So regenerated jet weapon, what it does, you target a ship. That ship itself basically becomes invulnerable, but has its damage output reduced by 75%, and it can target dreadnoughts. So you could target like the Scimitar. The Scimitar becomes invulnerable, but its engines become disabled, and its maneuvering thrusters become disabled. So it can't move, and it can only fire at basically only 25% of its output.
It's a good one to micro. I've never actually really messed with that one as much.
So thank you, Banana, for 1 saying it in chat and 2 for making me check the file. So I checked the file now. So actually, that's a really good ability. In fact, that again, that's something I'd target at a Dreadnought Progenitor class. I mean, what? So yeah,
if it targets the Dreadnought, it's a good ability automatically.
Yeah, so that's a really not cheeky one from Majed. He's good. He's good. I like him. And I think the Cardassian heroes are a little bit different to the other faction heroes, as in they do give you fleet buffs, which are important, but they're very good at doing stuff to planets again. And Rob spoke about how people misunderstood Gowron and how good Gowron was because of the planet disruption. And you got to remember that Sins is a game of planet capture at the end of the day, and your planets planet assault is very important in the game, and actually, like, if you lose population, you're affecting things like the opponent's economy. So anything that is an ability that damages planets and planet population levels is actually really, really good ability.
Especially something you can just drop and fly away that's probably not going to get noticed.
Yeah. So a lot of players tend to go, oh, but it doesn't help my fleet. Well, it doesn't necessarily help your fleet, but that's not to say it doesn't help your game. So it's these are the kind of things we really want players, and which is why we wanted to do the series, to be honest with you, in the first place. Even though we've had to notice a few things and change a few things ourselves. It's good from 2 points, but we want to tell you guys what we think about how you should use the ships as the game's designers. And I think for the most part, you guys did use all the abilities on ships or once or twice, but actually wanted to make you think about actually how good some of the abilities can be. Anyhow, moving on, what I'm going to do is bring Rob onto this little beastie over here. Now, just a caveat, we're about to talk about I wouldn't say it's a Titan. It's a special, unique thing that the Cardassian player has that no other player in the game gets. This is the Dreadnought missile. Rob's going to talk about it. I did this on purpose. The Dreadnought missile. And what I want to mention about the Dreadnought missile is, first of all, when you play Union, you will get something that looks like a normal Gimor Fleet dry dock, but it isn't. It will be called the Missile Shipyard. And this is actually tied, and it's really hard to info card this, guys, so you'll have to forgive us, but this is actually tied to the same research as the Hutet to unlock. So effectively what this gives you is the ability, you can still build a Hutet. This is where it's different to the other factions where you have 2 Titans, like the Shockwave. You can build these Dreadnought missiles, and you can build, in a game, up to 3 of them. Okay? You can build up to 3 of these. You can build... no, Schism, it's not the final one. This is there's the Dominion still to come. We split the Dominion into a different video because it's too big a faction to do all in one night, and our brains would be frazzled. But this is a really good ship. I want to say just a shout out to obviously Larvo of Sins of a Galactic Empire fame, who initially helped me put this in originally a long time back. But I do like to mention him because he helped me implement it. But essentially, there's a buff that applies. So once you've built 3, you can build no more. And without further ado, this is where I'm now going to hand off to Rob, who's going to tell you what it does.
Why do you make me cover things that I just think are memes and are BM?
That's right, because the game has to have memes. Everyone's got memes. Memes for days.
This thing's a meme, okay? If you just want to style on your opponent, what this thing does, you fly it into a planet, it just turns it into... is it a shattered? It just turns it into a shattered world?
Oh no, it's worse than that. It turns it into an asteroid belt. It's even meaner than a shattered world.
It just blows up the planet. It's good to... I mean, you could use it tactically to try to snipe a large M tempered or something, but for the most part, it's just a way to BM your opponent. It's like manor muling, or... Because it's slow, it's not going to get in there quickly. It's... God, memes.
You can sneak it in. This is actually quite a tanky. It's quite a tanky little ship. It's got 13 armor.
Dude, if somebody who's actually good is playing, they're not gonna. This is not gonna sneak in and kill any of their planets.
You say that, but it won't work against you directly. But I think it'll work against some players. We'll see. We'll see. It depends. You can pull it in. The thing to realise is obviously if you use this, it's a weapon of last resort. So you're not gonna then, and this is where Rob, and I can understand why Rob wouldn't use it in a PvP scenario. If you're planning to run a tournament in Sins with STA3, this is not something you're probably going to want to use, because any planet you destroy, you effectively deny yourself as well.
And it's expensive, and it's not going to directly affect your winning the game.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a meme. But yeah, it has Exterminatus, a bit of a Warhammer 40k reference there, and it will literally, you target a planet, it'll fly towards a planet, it will then descend into the orbit, and then it will make that planet dead. So very, very powerful. It's not defenseless. It has a foreign shockwave ability, which does 200 damage a second for 6 seconds. So it's quite good at defending itself, believe it or not. And again, it's of fame. But you can build 3 of these. We think it's quite fun. I hope you enjoy it. I just want to say, one of the things I get asked is, it's not building. It doesn't actually physically build in the missile shipyard. So you press the button and you'll think, where is it? Why hasn't it turned up? It does take 300 seconds, and what will happen is it will call it into the gravity well. So it's actually a summon rather than a build. Unfortunately, with the way it works, I can't actually get it to physically represent itself. It will show that it's building one in there, but it won't actually. There you go, it's showing it's building one, but there you go. There it is. Look at it. It won't actually appear here. It will appear at the edge of the gravity well. So it's just something to be aware of, guys. If you are using it, don't look at the ship. I think, where is it? It will come in from one of the edges of the gravity wells. But you can build 3 of them, and then it will tell you that the entity's been disabled by another ability. So that's the Dreadnought missile. We hope you enjoyed the meme. And Tom, that kind of leaves you with this big beastie.
The brick wall.
The brick wall.
The built like a brick shithouse.
Yeah, that one.
Yes, the Houtet Dreadnought. I really don't know who came up with the name, to be honest with you, and part of me is surprised Star Trek Online haven't attempted to steal the model to put in as like a unique Cardassian Dreadnought, because it seems like the sort of thing that they would do. It is pretty much the final word in Support Titan. Think Ankleon from stock TEC in Sin's Rebellion. The Houtet is that, but of course better because it is produced by the glorious Cardassian Union. It has a pair of support abilities, and then it also has a pair of deploy abilities.
Affirmative.
So what you have in its first slot is a damage reduction, armor, and more damage reduction and armor, but a damage reduction that applies to itself and a damage reduction that applies to all vessels in area. Yeah. I believe the armor is the top damage reduction applies to self.
Correct.
If you wouldn't mind hovering over the Houtet and confirm that for me. No, it's the bottom damage reduction that applies to self. The top damage reduction applies to ships around it, and the armor applies to itself. And I think the armor applies to both, doesn't it? No, just itself by the looks of it.
No, it applies to. No, the armor applies out as well. The armor applies out.
Just not the Dreadnought missile.
Yeah. He don't need no armor.
Doesn't need anything else.
He doesn't get anything. He's a Dreadnought missile.
Then the 2 deployment abilities. It has the capacity to deploy some underslung Norins, which I can't remember what abilities they have. I don't know. I can't recall if they've got different abilities or if they've got slightly different ones. They do. They have they've got the fractal shield generator and the tachyon beam. Then they also have an additional repair ability that the old Norin used to have. So these are very much support Norins. They'll help give you a little bit of extra repair on top of any other repairs that you've got in your fleet from the Kessock.
I think they do more damage as well. If I just
and Tonga
check, they do quite a bit.
Do a little bit of extra damage as well. Yeah, they're very nice. The third ability is a turret deploy. The second ability is a turret deploy. So very plainly, it just poops out a Cardassian C3112 or C12 defense platform. Which does have enhanced damage over the regular defense platform. So again, it is another damage producing supplement. And then the final ability is it's a pretty bland one, unfortunately, but it is just a torpedo barrage salvo that has a certain number of max targets that increase with levels, as well as the damage. It's pretty modest. It's got a fairly long cooldown time, but doing 1,000 damage to 25 different targets isn't
it's nothing to be sniffed
too
at.
bad.
Yeah, it's not like even its damage. It's not going to win prizes for, like, it's no Romulan scimitar, but then what it does for your fleet in comparison to what the scimitar does for its fleet is night and day. I think this is the thing with the Hootet. Like people are like, oh yeah, it's okay, damage wise, it sort of does a bit of pew, but it's that's not what it's there for. It's not. You're building it for damage, guys. You're prepared to be disappointed, miserably disappointed, unless of course you're in a fleet combat. But it is as you said, it is the ultimate in support dreadnoughts. So I think it's still you take it for that first buff. I think the command deck. That's why you take it. Would you agree, Rob?
Yeah, you want to take it to buff your fleet. That fleet buff is pretty powerful, and he's also just a huge damage sink as well. It just adds so much effective hit points to your fleet. I love the Hootet. It's one of my favorites. Anyone who doesn't like the Hootet's crazy.
Yeah, it's a great Titan. And that brings us to the end of our ship. So as always, we've got a few things to talk about in terms of the actual fleet. Now we have the I didn't actually build one, did I? Because I said I was going to build one after all that, and then I never actually built one. We have let's just do some no slot restrictions are on. Instant build times are on, so that's good. Let me just build the no, that's not the one. That one, normal comm array. So the normal comm array is the Union Doctrine Center. It looks the same as AR-52. What does it do? One, it has this warp drive speed decrease. So that decreases warp drive speed, obviously. So by 200%, that's quite a lot. So the speed in which you travel across a phase lane, I think it is. That's quite good. It lasts 45 seconds. A good way of slowing down an enemy fleet. And then it has the same kind of ability as the Tal Shiar station. So this is a spy ability, which doesn't cost you anything. It does have a long cooldown, but it allows you to effectively choose. Obviously, I've got all entities set here, but you can choose a well and see everything inside it. Whoa, the Federation has expanded.
Hotkey 8 of these bad boys and just hit tab and click through it and just light up the whole map.
Exactly. Same with the Tal Shiar stations. If you need to scout a path and find the path of least obstacles, or you want to sneak a dreadnought missile maybe round the flank. I'm gonna keep labouring that point. You want to sneak a dreadnought into someone's backyard. This would be the station that's going to help you do that safely. So there you go. I think it's a good station to have. This is the other thing I wanted to mention about this station, because we have very limited build slots because of the Dominion ships. The other thing I get asked is, how do I build my envoys as the Cardassian Union or the Dominion? You need your comm station. So your standard comm station is where your Korat class envoy now exists. So if you're looking for your envoys to be able to form packs with other players, or form packs with minor factions, or form packs in general, you will need to build this from your comm station. So that's why I said earlier, you cannot afford to ignore your standard Union Doctrine Center, because you would then miss out on things like your envoys. So this is something you need to just keep in mind. There's no real easy way for us to highlight this to people, unfortunately. So that is where it is. And I expect many questions for years to come, probably saying, where's the envoys? So that's that. Tom, do you want to just talk to us a little bit quickly before you go on to the outpost as always about the defence station and the turret?
Yeah, so the Cardassian turrets, sort of in line with the Klingon ones, they have a shared damage types. So as we've sort of previously outlined with the Federation and Romulans, they've got their torpedo and phaser turrets split. The Klingon and Cardassian turrets are one weapon platform. So the Cardassian turret, I believe, does anti-light and anti-heavy or anti-very heavy. I'm just attempting to find the...
I think wasn't it anti-medium and anti-very heavy?
Might be. I'm just attempting to find the entity.
Is that...
Sea station turret, nice and simple. Looks like I've given it composite and anti-very heavy at the moment.
There you go.
I'll have to. Yeah, that looks like that's what I've done for the moment.
This is where I get to highlight, Tom, that you are doing the turret and star bases, so that any problems stream, any problems at all,
they get labelled on my back.
Caesar's Legion is his name in the Discord. Feel free to pester him with messages. No, don't do that.
To complain at me. So the big difference between the Klingon and Romulan. Oh, sorry. The big difference between the Klingon and Cardassian turrets and the Federation and Romulan turrets is largely down to their build times. So the Klingon and Cardassian turret build times have been increased in contrast because fundamentally they are very strong platforms. As you can see there at max tech, you're looking at 12,000 hull and 6,600 shields. At base value, it should be, I believe, 8,000 and 5,500. So they are beefy turrets. And as such, the increase in build time is designed to... Essentially, if you're building these turrets, you want to be building them before your opponent is in the well and attacking you. You don't want to be building them as you are under attack, because the length of time you will have to spend building them means they likely won't get finished. What I am interested in exploring is whether there is a build time penalty for when something is under attack. I don't know if that's actually a thing that Sins does, but it'd be nice to add in if possible. So the Cardassian turret, as with the Klingon one, longer build time, but it is stronger, and since it does universal damage values, you don't have to think about what's likely to attack it. That will be your turret. It will do its job against everything with reasonable success. It has two abilities, both of which are passive, which ties into nearby turrets. So the first is damage output and chance to hit to all turrets in the nearby vicinity in itself. And then the second is a debuff to enemy ships, mimicking sort of the Janissary sensor dampening field, so it reduces enemy weapon range and chance to hit within that radius. And then when you stack that on top of the Ivec defense platform or defense station, you get, as with the Klingon command station, you get an increase to weapon range, a bonus to damage reduction, and a bonus increase to shield restore rate for structures within the radius. And it does also have a lovely defensive call-in ability to summon some extra ships to help save the day if you fall under attack.
Here's a fleet I made earlier. So yeah. Totally. I like. I think turrets were fundamentally overused in the Uprising. In fact, we talked about it in the very first stream. The PvP community, I blame Rob for this, had pretty much decided that the fastest way to expand their territory was to colonise a world, because there was no planet bombing from militia, and then use turrets to kill everything instead of actually fighting the militia. So it just goes to show how strong the turrets were. And to be fair, Tom has done, and I can't stress enough, Tom has done a load of work, guys, on your behalf to really bring turrets and star bases.
And the way they interact with the planets they're built on.
Yeah, exactly. And Tom's actually overhauled the entire planetary system as well in SDA3 for me. So I'm very eternally grateful to him, and of course Farbicus for all the effects he does as well, as I always say. But Tom's done a lot of work on this, so it's very much appreciated. And I think you guys will appreciate that the turrets now work differently. I think, Rob, you even mentioned, didn't you, in a recent PvP match with Trekker on your Discord, that you actually came up a bit unstuck when he was using the Federation outposts and turrets. He managed to counter you quite well.
Yeah, so I went for an all-in on Dominion versus Federation, which is a really bad strategy, but it was something I really wanted to try. I'd been kind of coming up with a build order for it in my head for a long time, and essentially I got there, and I would have won the game right then and there, but he had an outpost finishing up as I got there, and a couple of turrets around it. And it managed to basically stop my all-in from working, and then the game had to go into me retreating and trying to macro out of my all-in that failed, which slowed me down tremendously. And then there was just, from 6 or 7 minutes into the game, non-stop skirmishes all over the place. We were fighting each other, trying to snipe each other's tech. It was a lovely game. Yeah,
absolutely. So turrets, I think you guys will like the changes Tom's made, and
yeah, they didn't feel overpowered. They were still fragile, and you could get in and kill them. It wasn't like
Yeah.
they used to be, where you could sit there and shoot them forever. So
Yeah.
But
cancerous.
the damage output they produce made a significant difference to the outcome of the battle.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just straight stopped me from doing that all in. So
Yeah.
So this brings us nicely onto our first station. Now, the reason we're showing both off is because we did do the faction split. Unlike the other factions, which is unique to the Cardassians and the Dominion, is you won't actually get your full starbase when you start a game. You'll actually get the Terok Nor station. This one is, well, you'll get a Nor station essentially. You won't be Terok Nor, but this one is Rumil Nor, as it's called. So you'll get a Nor station as your starting starbase. That's not to say that these starbases are slouches by any way, shape, or means, but they're not as strong as your full mushroom starbase, say, for the Federation, or your Presidium for the Romulans. So these are good, but you may even consider on your homeworld scuttling this station in the long run to replace it with a full-on EVAS starbase.
No, I disagree.
You disagree? Well, we can explain why in a second, but you may decide that. But let's talk a little bit about the abilities. Rob, do you want to take us over the Terra Nor, or Rumil Nor, as this one is?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, you're gonna have to hover over the abilities for me, except for Oppressive Regime, because I can't actually remember them all. So Duranium Shadows, big debuff to enemies. Wow,
That is a big.
that's pretty nice.
That's a stonky debuff.
Yeah, that's a big debuff. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Enslaved populace is O regime. This gives you increased trade income, increased tax income, and then it says negative population, but that's actually a good thing, and I'll explain that in a second. And it makes your culture spread slower, which doesn't really matter if you're using it economically. This upgrade is amazing because it allows you to social spec a planet and actually hit your maximum population quicker while getting more money than you would have. Because of the tax increase and because of the way that the new planet system works, that trade income can still be useful. So this ability being able to be accessed cheaply is why I'm a big fan of the Nor station. It's such a huge economic boost. So juicy.
There you go. You heard it here first. Never build an EVAS. Well, maybe. No, you still build an EVAS, I think.
They have Oppressive Regime as well, but
Yeah,
it costs so much money.
Yeah.
Energy dampener. Targets. Let's see. Oh, it disables abilities. Hey, anything that disables abilities is very
It's like
powerful.
you can see like Rob's just obsessed with enslaved
I'm obsessed with it.
but
No, I'm so
pays
obsessed with
no
Oppressive Regime.
attention to any of the other abilities that I put on these stations.
I don't
all
even
that
care
time.
what they do. They don't
Dude,
matter.
They don't matter to you. Let's just run. Tom, is there any changes actually coming to the Nor stations that you want to talk about now?
Not in terms of abilities, no. Broadly speaking, my current working plan for starbases and outposts involves sort of redistributing where the upgrade costs lie. So one of the big issues and distinctions between outposts and starbases at the moment is the way outposts are about 10% of the cost of a starbase. Which is a reasonable solution to making outposts more attractive than starbases, but doesn't go all the way, in my view, to solving the issue of outposts being inferior to starbases. So my current operating plan is to distinguish outposts and starbases more in terms of upgrade costs rather than initial build costs. So that's not to say they're going to have the same initial build cost, but it's no longer going to be 10 times more than an outpost. And my plan is for factional distinctions to come into play in terms of where the upgrade costs lie for starbases. So for the Federation, their cultural and economic bonuses on their mushroom starbase will be cheaper than their military-related technologies and upgrades. For the Klingons, as the direct contrast, their military upgrades will be cheaper than their direct economic boosts. And the idea overall is to make them more factionally defined. So with the Cardassian and Dominion EVAS starbase, their big selling point is that they are shipyards. The Monac station that we see for the Dominion, for example, is in DS9 part of a shipyard complex. And one of the ways that these star bases really don't get used is as shipyards. It's one of the few things people.
That's the way I always used them.
Not to necessarily want to develop them, depending on what stage of the game they're at. But what we can do with so far as the upgrade costs and build times are concerned is to encourage that more. And then the actual build time of the starbase themselves can be, I believe it already is fairly significantly higher. I think it's about 10 minutes for the construction time of a starbase at base normal speeds.
It is.
Obviously, if you change that with the gameplay speeds, I think you can halve it in build time to 5 minutes. But one of the things I like doing when I'm hosting multiplayer games is to mix and match my stats. I don't like having everything on fastest because at the end of the day, if you have everything on fastest, everything will be on fastest.
Heretic.
That said, if you want to have slightly slower build times to allow for some faster ship speeds and build times to be more impactful, to slow down the rates of the economic booming. So part of the reason, as Rob has highlighted, these 1v1s do go very quickly is because they play on fastest gameplay speeds. And that's fine if you want a quick game. But that said, not everyone is up for that. You don't have to feel obligated to do that. I personally, when I do my larger scale 3v3, 4v4, 5v5 matches, I prefer to tone things down a little bit, especially when it comes to, for example, fleet sizes. I don't tend to play with large fleet sizes for stability reasons, for example.
I play on normal fleet sizes
always feel free to mix and match those gameplay speeds, because sometimes they'll highlight things that are broken, and sometimes they will just allow for a different pace of game, be it a bit more relaxed or a little bit more intense.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to add to that, we obviously Thomas said this is the EVAS starbase. It has the Geranium Shadows. It has enslaved boxes. It also has call-in reinforcements. Now, interestingly, this is the only way, because a lot of people ask me about this, how the Cardassians get Kessok light ships. So these are the light cruisers, the Kessok light cruisers, which also have repair binding. So yes, you can still get access to them if you're wondering, as a Cardassian player, and that is through
the call,
the EVAS, the call-in. It's quite expensive. I think with the call-ins, what you'll realise is actually you're getting a bit of a rough deal in terms of, like, it seems like you're getting a lot of ships, but you are paying substantially large amounts of crystal, dilithium and minerals. So actually it works out more expensive than if you were to just build the ships. But
yeah,
then
we
again,
talked about this earlier.
Yeah.
It's the upside is that you don't have build times, so they just come in.
Yeah,
so
you get
you're
all of
kind
these.
of paying to not have a build time.
Yeah, so it's an emergency call-in. And then the favourite, Rob, isn't it, really? The super spiral wave lance.
Yeah, I love that ability. I like trying to maximize the number of ships it flies through and blows up.
Yeah, so this is the big brother of all spiral lances. So it does a whopping 5,000 damage, and it has 30,000 range. And it's actually a very good defensive ability against, pesky siege ships that are trying to engage your starbase. So it's quite nice if you want to try and take out some siege ships, or do some damage to a buzzard class or something like that. So it's a good ability, and hopefully you'll build this. The Dominion do get a different starbase, which we'll come on to in our Dominion stream. But that's kind of all we wanted to show you in terms of ships and fleets and everything else. Do you guys, Rob? Do you want to start with? No, in fact, Tom, do you want to start with PvE and generally your advice, the strengths and weaknesses of the Union overall for PvE games?
As has already been mentioned elsewhere, the Union is very much a take and hold I'm directly stealing that statement, whoever put that in chat. A take and hold faction, that is definitely true. The Union have very solid defences, and ultimately, because the Union fleet is broadly speaking quite slow, what you really have to do is make sure you are in a position to hold out long enough so that if you need to respond, what you're responding with gets there in time.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you do have capacity to build quick response flotillas of certain types of ships, but they are not going to be your capital ships, and they're definitely not going to be your Hutet. So you can tailor, if you need to, specific response forces. That said, the outpost for the Nor is, statistically speaking, superior to other factions' outposts.
Well, at least in direct combat it is.
In direct combat, and as you are so much a fan of highlighting, the enslaved populace is a very powerful ability as well. So it does serve a good combined administrative and defensive role, especially when it's then supported by the turrets and defense station or defense command center. So all I'll really say from a PvE perspective, as is generally the case in PvE, what you really need to make sure you do is you get your capital ships leveled up, you focus on building the strength of your abilities, getting into a point where you can effectively defend against the AI, because generally speaking, trying to rush the AI isn't something that works, because the AI is always able to, certainly on the high difficulties, produce more stuff than you, just because the way Sin's AI unfortunately is in terms of giving it strength.
Ready to fight.
So yeah, that's my main advice really in a PvE situation. Just don't overextend yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rob, what about the PvP side of things?
I think PvP and PvE, in overall approach, are actually quite similar. Like the take and hold thing, I'll just take it from Tom, who took it from somebody else. But the Union has this interesting kind of thing where they benefit more from going industry specialization early on than another faction might, just because a lot of other factions, especially Romulans, like they're always going to social spec because they get the most value out of social specking because of their tax increases that are kind of available early. The Dominion does have some tax increases, but they're available later and they'll still affect you now quite well with the industry specialization thanks to Tom's planet changes. So you can early on as Dominion or Union go for industry spec on your capital and pop down 2 or 3 shipyards and use that extra production to push out and take more worlds quicker. And then as Dominion, you typically leverage that one way. The Union leverages it kind of a different way by defending it and not kind of using it to gain an economic advantage, because their late game economy is very powerful due to their resource focus extraction being as strong as it is. And with the new changes, that resource focus extraction is actually more strong than it ever was before. So the Union's late game economy is like on par with Federation's. So what you're going to do on Union is kind of try to get out and get as many planets as you can, and then you're going to want to lock them down. So one difference for PvP that I would definitely want to highlight is that you want to build on Union your like logistics in clusters, because you're pretty much going to want to have oppressive regime on every planet. You're going to want outposts everywhere, so building your logistics kind of around outposts and with the ability to throw down turrets next to them if you need to, this is going to really help you deal with harassment, because then only sort of torpedo frigates and the likes, which are pretty weak and can be countered quite quickly, will be the only things that are super effective against you, since a normal like small harassment fleet's not going to fly into an outpost and turrets. So this is kind of how you deal with that harassment and that multi-pronged harassment we were talking about earlier, Keith, is you build your structures, and this does take some APM, so it's a little bit annoying, but you build your structures in these clusters to help protect them.
Yeah.
And then you're going to probably kind of do this everywhere. And so you're investing in the long run. You're getting your O regime everywhere. You're getting your resource focus extraction. And you're trying to play for the long game, where you're going to have a bigger, better economy and a stronger combined fleet than anybody can really have.
So how do you feel, Rob, if you're playing, say, well, let's say you're playing the Federation? How do you deal with the Union as an opposing player? Because the Finn's got to have a weakness, right?
Yeah, attack them early and try to pick them apart before they have enough money to get things that they want. Once they have everything they want, it's really, really, really hard to beat them. So what you want to do is harass them as much as possible everywhere you possibly can, and try to not let them get those logistics clusters set up. Try to not let them get that perfect fleet. Try to stop them from getting, massive amounts of production, because their ships do build a little bit slower than, say, I guess like Dominion or some of the other factions. So you just kind of want to try to stop them from reaching critical mass, and there's a lot of ways to do it. So that multi-pronged harassment is a big feature. So in a big, huge map where you can't get to them quickly, engage. I don't know.
Yeah,
that'd be pretty bad.
Yeah. It's different if you let them grow too fast. Like a lot of factions, they kind of become an unstoppable Union roller coaster.
I guess you'd try to kill them in the mid game with a timing attack as Federation if you couldn't harass them early, because you're going to have a superior mid game economy, and so you might be able to just overwhelm them, just brute force your way through them.
Yeah. I think you can use their sort of slow speed to your advantage as well by harassing, because the big fun I always take away is that if you can destroy the logistics, you obviously not.
Yeah, that's why I was saying the multi-pronged harassment where you fly around with hit squad.
Yeah, absolutely. So is that kind of like using, especially as Feds, using like the Prometheus with the Defiant Rush, and just speeding past the Cardassians before they can respond is a really good trick to do.
If the Union player doesn't develop their territory properly, and they don't have good clusters and they don't have good defenses, it's always better to try to just base trade them because they're slower at it and you'll win. That's another way of winning, and I've done that multiple times to Union players that are rather good in the multiplayer community. Is that I'll just base race them because I know I can outrun their ships and kill them that way.
Affirmative.
So I think I'm getting a bit of lag on this stream now on my game, so probably because I've been running it too long. But effectively, what you should see is that the Cardassian fleet is quite slow, and this giant Federation fleet here, if I can get it to run, there you go, is going to probably, my game is freezing up. I'm sorry, guys. So as always, I get a little bit of lag because I'm running in window mode. But yeah, effectively, this Federation, you should be able to see it even at this pace, is moving a lot quicker across the gravity well than my Cardassian fleet is even getting into position. So it's quite, you can see even with this reduced speed in the window here that it's actually quite a slow fleet to position. I don't know how this fight's going to go. The Federation's actually coming for it, so I actually think the Federation probably, they look like they outnumber me massively, so... and I'm not sure I'm going to show it on the screen. So, any questions in the chat before we call the stream to an end at all from you guys? Anything you want to know about Union? Anything you feel is uncertain, unsure? Ryan says Fed ships are just 90% turbo lifts.
Yeah, that and, I don't know, peace-loving space utopia garbage.
They just want to be your friends, right? They just want to be your friends.
Walk 10 meters down the corridor, you're at turbo lift. Perfect.
Are the Federation chasing after Dreadnought? They are, aren't they? They clearly know what that Finn does. They're like, don't go to my home planet with Dreadnought. That's not fun. No, they're just like, that's not going to end well.
It makes me want a diamond in the Union fleet to cast its armor buff on the Dreadnought, so it just takes infinity damage.
They got so many Defiant classes there. That's scary. I'm not sure I want to fight this Fed fleet, if I'm being honest with you.
Oh, why would you target a single ship like that? Stop! No, go back and cancel that. What are you doing?
For Cardassia.
Move order into the middle of them. That's what you spend. Oh, thank you.
There's a lot of challenges.
There's a lot of... They're still chasing Dreadnought. This is the AI for you. They're just like, we must kill that pesky planet-destroying weapon before it reaches our planet. Feds are willing to chase one of those missiles all the way into the Delta Quadrant. Very, very true. Very, very
Quickly
true.
blow up a planet.
I'm actually having trouble getting my Cardassian fleet to catch up with the Federation fleet, so this just goes
Yeah,
to
they
show
don't want to fight you.
they don't want to fight me. They're slow. I'm sure what I'm gonna.
That's why those defenses are important. They buy time for your fleet to get there, and then you just shove people out. This is a really good illustration of why, base racing is the best.
So
Oh, the way you command ships to fight is just giving me cancers.
I'm not obviously playing how I would play. I'm just trying to get a fight going here. So this might be I don't know if the Cardassians are going to win this. To be fair.
No, there's quite a few fed ships. It just depends. You did have the capital ships at level 10, but you don't have all their abilities put in.
So we stacked it. But what I want to show off first, while that fight's going on. Meanwhile.
All right. Yeah.
Meanwhile, there's a Federation.
Look, if you want to
here.
style on your opponent, if you hate who you're playing against and you want to show them that they're garbage, this is what you do.
So you just take a missile like this. You see, you look at the planet here. And yeah, we just profit, really. They're doing their best to get past the shields here with all their Hannah defences.
Exterminatus.
Here we go.
Yeah, but if you're going to click to attack, is JWLZ JMLZ, or is it a different person? I don't know.
I think it's JMLZ.
If you're gonna click to attack, then you need to give a stop command once you get there, like instantly, or you'll have all your ships doing overkill damage on the one target, which is, yeah, it's bad to focus fire. Yes, Dominus, it's bad to focus fire.
And now, there is no planet, you see? No more planet for Federation, it's completely gone. There you go. So that's that. So there's a Dreadnought missile, doing what it does best. And meanwhile, let's have a look how the fight's going. It doesn't... Wow, this is...
It's not good.
It's just not good.
This isn't a very good showcase. What are you doing, Keith?
Klingon fleet, circa 23.
Well, why did we go in with such a small fleet? I'm feeling robbed of an epic battle.
I just wanted to show you the superiority of the Federation.
Dirty space hippies.
The Federation sends its best.
Awaiting further orders.
If you're going to focus fire, you need to have hotkey groups specifically. So I see this going on in the chat. If you're going to focus fire something, you need to have like a group of 10 ships that are designed to focus fire what you're focus firing at. Because sometimes you focus fire on a capital ship or something, but you don't want all your ships shooting it. Because if you have a bunch of ships that are supposed to be dealing with light ships, targeting capital ships, you're really wasting your damage potential. And the AI, while not perfect at targeting, and it does make some mistakes, it will try to target the most effective thing for the ship's weapon types. So you don't want to just click on ships. That's why I was hounding Keith earlier, because he kept clicking on a single ship to initiate a fight. And the only way you're going to want to do that is if you're... Yes, it's washed up space. Space. Anyways, the only reason you want to do that is to make your fleet move in faster, but then you stop command it immediately. And you're going to want to have hotkey groups for anything that you're going to target fire. Otherwise, it's bad to do. Dreadnoughts then. Don't focus fire Dreadnoughts either, because you will end up taking more damage because they're such good damage sinks. So sometimes even having a Dreadnought, you'll just put it in your fleet so the enemy will focus fire it, and they won't kill your other ships, and then your other ships will have more time to DPS out their fleet, and then their fleet dies, and it actually ends up being a good cost-effective trade.
Yeah. I will say, this game, I've got mine. I've got the random events turned on at the moment, and so far we've had a Doomsday machine and an asteroid heading towards the planet, so it's not looking good. So
you can see the fact that there's any ships left for the Cardassians here is pretty impressive, to be honest.
All the Federation cap ships are dead.
Yeah, the Federation ships are not killing. Some of these Cardassian ships are really, they're holding in there. You can see they still have shields. I mean,
Yeah,
given how outnumbered they are.
Tech and armor and things, it's yeah, it's pretty insane.
Oh, the Legates taking damage.
It's a good indication of how tanky they are, if nothing else.
Now, obviously, the Federation isn't focus firing here, but you know we could get them. So if you're a player, you're obviously gonna. The AI won't do this either, but you would try and target down one particular ship probably.
Yeah, you'd have a hotkey group of Defiance or
Yeah.
Harpies or something that's specifically for sniping capital
But
ships. You'd also have abilities.
Even now, this is what we're talking about, the max damage stack. This Legate, I mean, everything is trying to target this Legate, and it is just tanking and tanking.
It's
the
going
damage.
down, but you're right.
It's so tanky at this point.
And that's just a Legate. That's not even something that's actually tanky.
Yeah. Oh, they got it.
Damn.
Please direct all claims of Federation bias to Species 8472.
There are probably bioships flying around right now, just nuking Federation ships left, right, and centre.
There are a pair of bioships, yes.
Yeah. Just like, yeah, we're going to nuke you. That's the metagenic weapon going off, for anybody's wondering what the lovely green cloud and even this, like, we're now trying, so we're trying to focus fire down this Kestok heavy cruiser here. And
yeah,
again,
the Kestok heavy. Oh.
It's just a
Look at it
beast.
lose like 100 life at a time, even though it's being shot by 50 ships. and if you target heals on these, it can really make them just last forever.
Yeah. He's so impressed with himself. He's just leveling up now like a boss. He's like, yeah, go on, shoot me more. Seriously, come on, Federation fleet, do your worst.
All power to weapons.
It's actually funny. The Federation fleet's getting whittled down a little bit. I don't think they'll lose because they had such a numbers advantage in the first place. But
I think I did see. I think Cisco's alive somewhere, unless he's dead now. He was alive. Still alive. That Kestok heavy cruiser. So much firepower, just so tanky. And a lot of this is coming from the Hutet as well. So you can't underestimate what the Titans add in here to their damage reduction numbers.
no, the Hutet's amazing. It makes the Kesoks last. I mean, that was what 2,000 HP that entire fleet of Federation ships was trying to cut through, and it took them over a minute.
Yeah. They're desperately trying to whittle down, and a lot of the other Cardassian ships here. I'm not even going to try and kill Gul Dukat, not with 37 armor. It's just never going to happen. But you can just see how once the Cardassians start to stack those advantages with their capital ship, especially at level 10, how we're saying any faction can be just so powerful. So like any faction, we saw it with the Romulans in the last stream. That actually, when the Romulans got to that kind of sizable number, the amount of debuffs and stuff they could stack, if you weren't at a similar level, that it was pretty much an unstoppable force when you have that many Romulan capital ships all buffed up to a high level.
Yeah, I want to point out the kinds of ships that are left, because all of the ships that are Cardassian that are left are really capital ships. They're having a hard time taking out those smaller ships. So you can see there's a lot of Sabers, there's some Intrepids, there's ships with lighter armor types, and they're still there because they're tanking the damage because of the damage types, because capital ships do anti-very heavy damage. So you can see the on display right here the new system in work. You know, it's kind of cool to see exactly how it's working. Like, you don't see too many Akiras or any big ships left really.
And likely this is also why they're having so much trouble trying to really damage these capital ships, because their weapon types aren't designed to punch through the armor of some of these capital ships. Now, that being said, the damage constants will still apply some damage, but obviously it's so neutered by the weapon types they have.
Yeah,
that
it does
really
favor
struggling.
the higher tech ships, but not by enough that it's a big deal.
Alert the crew.
But this is great for look, it doesn't help when your Defiants are running over there trying to fly after a bio ship that's going to blow up any second anyway. I love this. Look, Defiant hunting bioship hunting Defiance. This is great.
Altering course. Awaiting orders.
Come back.
Steady as she goes.
Are those Defiants being taunted, by the way?
Yes, is forced.
They are. Oh, so the bioships do have a taunt.
Maybe they do. Yeah, I thought they didn't.
No, I didn't think they did either.
Let's just. Oh, they do. I lied earlier on the stream. They do have the force attacking. There you go. That's even better then. There you go. So you were right. Whoever said it earlier, was it Trick Tick? Maybe it was Trick Tick.
think it was Triptych, yeah.
Maybe they still do. I see. This is the problem, as we said earlier. There's so many different abilities on different ships.
I was watching the
I can't
Defiant.
remember
They give you a different. I saw you give them a different attack order, and they keep chasing. I was like, that's a force attacking problem right there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great though. I don't mind that. So, but yeah, this is a brilliant example, as Rob said, of the damage constants at play, and why the Cardassian fleet is struggling here, because all the ships that they did have can't actually damage the smaller ships. So it's basically people throwing rocks at each other's hull at the moment.
Apart from those few Defiants that just have mini Captain Cisco's flying around dodging all of the shots.
Yeah. I'm really impressed that this Dahil's still alive. Somehow there is a Dahil alive, which is usually the first ship to die.
It's actually, you can see just how
You've
Cardassians looked like they were going to lose by a long shot, and they're actually whittling down the Fed fleet over time just with that tankiness.
Yeah, it's just amazing. And this is the thing is, by this time I could have called in reinforcements from the Cardassian homeworld. You know, lots of different things you can do.
You could have realized you were going to lose more than you wanted to and just tried to back off to some defenses, and you would have had time to do it even though your ships are so slow.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't underestimate the Defiant classes here with the damage being applied.
The Defiants are the only thing doing damage, probably, right now.
Pew 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 pew. But again, it's another showing of all the new beam effects that has been added in. Max spent a lot of time on. Farb's done a lot of work on different particles as well for STA3. So, really, when you get your new version, guys, you are getting something that's been really lovingly crafted to be this final edition that we wanted to give you as our kind of farewell to Armada 3 updates. As we continue to focus our time on AOTF. And I did mention recently, guys, in the Discord, if you are members of our Discord, that actually we are going to be changing AOTF quite considerably over the coming months. This is AOTF 1, because we realise that, while it's a very pretty game and the models are fantastic and the weapon effects are fantastic, that we didn't quite hit the mark with the gameplay that we wanted. So Sovereign Echo, who is the lead coder on that, whereas I'm the lead coder on this, is working really hard to try and get a lot done very quickly for AOTF, and hopefully I'm going to have him here on the Stellar Parallax YouTube channel very, very soon. Maybe even with Tom, with Caesar Legion as well, talking about some of the exciting stuff coming in AOTF 1, which I am so excited about, but I can't tell you because he will literally fire me out of an NX class torpedo tube, which we horrifically discovered in Discord recently means me being cut up into little pieces and shot out of a torpedo tube. So there you go. So do stay tuned for that as well. I'm quite happy with where we've got to in tonight's stream. Once again, I want to thank both Tom and Rob for joining me. You guys are fantastic and always very supportive of the mod and have done so much for the community. And also, thank you both for attending again.
Always happy to spend close to 3 hours on a stream.
Yeah, absolutely.
Man, I'll talk about people killing Bajorans for as long as you want. My wife and I have a saying that I won't utter here because it's rather profane, but it has to do with how much we hate the Bajorans.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, I hope you've enjoyed seeing our Cardassian Union preview tonight. It's been a long stream again, but I think it's been worthwhile. As always, if you have any follow-up questions to the stream tonight, do pop onto the Stellar Parallax Discord. You can find those links on our YouTube channel, and do get in touch if you're just loving the mod as well. Do pop in and just message the devs in the general STA free chat and just say thanks guys for making the game. They appreciate all the feedback they get. It's not just me. It's obviously Tom, there's Rob, there's Farbicus, there's Orion who does all the strings, there's Max who makes the models, there's Sovereign who gives advice to me for the coding. There's so many people, past and present, have gone to make STA free, and we're very thankful for them all. But without further ado, because it has been a long night, I'm going to let you all get back on to your gaming lives. We will see you very soon because there is another stream coming, this time for the Dominion, which we're very excited to share with you. That's our final faction debut, and then we are getting close to our release date, and I'll have a few bits of information on that for you coming up about how we're going to do the release. So that including the possible beta test that's coming up.
Yeah,
which is an
people are
open
wondering
beta.
about that. People are asking about the beta.
Oh, everyone wants access. They're like, I want to. So we're gonna have a bit of an open beta, and myself and Tom are just sorting out the final details now with Rob to work out how we're gonna actually deploy that open beta, how we're gonna share it, and how that's gonna move before we do the full release. And once we've done the full release, that's it for our Armada free coverage. It's on to AOTS and Infinities for me, and yeah, so that's it. Without further ado, thanks for joining us tonight, guys, and we will see you in a stream very, very soon. Good night.
Good night.
Later.